It's 7 p.m. I'd like to call the Budget Review Committee to order. It's May 25th, 2022. The meeting is being held in the Aldermatic Chamber and via Zoom. The meeting link can be found on the agenda and on the city's website. Let's start the meeting by taking a roll call attendance. If you are participating via Zoom, please state your presence, reason for not attending the meeting in person, and whether there is anyone in the room with you during this meeting, which is required under the right to know law. Would the clerk please call the roll?
Alderman at Large Laurie Wilshire.
I am here.
Alderman John Sullivan.
Here.
Alderwoman at Large Shoshana Kelly.
I'm here.
Alderman Ernest Jetty.
Here.
Alderman John Cathy.
Present.
Alderman at Large Michael O'Brien is present, and our chairman Richard A. Dowd.
Present.
Also in attendance for Alderman are Alderman Clay and Alderman Theobald. Also in attendance, Kim Kleiner, Director of Administrative Services, Nancy Trask, Human Resource Manager, Peter Donovan, Payroll Manager, Caitlin Pimentel, Employee Benefits Manager, Nick Mizevich, Nick, IT Deputy Director, Jennifer DeSales, Risk Manager, Jay Honeywell, Building Manager, Kelly Parkinson, Purchasing Manager, and Pamela Andeskevich, GIS Technician 2.
Okay, the first item on the agenda will be public comment. You come up to the microphone and you'll state your name and address, and you have 3 minutes.
Lori Ortolano, 41 Berkeley Street. I noticed in this budget, there's 2 new departments, Payroll and PEG Access Channel, that I'd be interested to know how payroll got moved over into this area. I know the mayor appointed cable TV to Ms. Kleiner. When we go through the budget within the assessing department, I'd like somebody to pay attention to who is going to be doing all the redacting on the property record files to get them up online. What positions are allocated to this? Have we looked at outsourcing the entire assessing office given the decline in employees within that office? How is right to know training done within your department since you want to hire a right to know paralegal? I did receive documents back from various departments on right to knows as of January 1st. I don't think the paralegal is justified based on the quantity of questions being asked and how they're processed. But we need to understand what the city and what specifically the Administrative Services Office considers a right to know request. What are we doing about the appeal costs, abatement appeal costs when it comes to settling in-house? We seem to be drawing those out for years and years, and we're spending 6% interest on those when other municipalities are settling those rapidly and not paying the literally hundreds of thousands in interest expenses. I think we should look at that. And what are we doing about the position that we need to collect the $10 million of unpaid taxes that haven't been collected on over a large number of years? I think we should be working on that. Do we need a paralegal or somebody to collect $10 million of unpaid taxes for people who have let property taxes slide 5, 6, 7, 10 years? IT department, how are we move away from backup tapes? When are we planning to get away from backup tapes as opposed to cloud-based storage? We've got emails on cloud-based storage. How many other municipalities are using backup tapes?
1 minute.
And what have we done to look at the 366-day storage policy based on litigation issues? What are we doing? Is there any cost increase to extend past 1 year to 3 years? What is happening with the ArcGIS project as far as linking the database to GIS? How many people in IT are involved on this? Who will be updated? Who will be responsible for updating all of the GIS data? And what are the difficulties in hiring right now? Risk management is a big budget area I'm really interested in. I think there's costs there that need to be looked at. What are our biggest risks? What are our concerns? What are we doing to minimize liability? How is the department capturing and tracking risk exposure? Purchasing, what changes have been made to the department? Payroll, where'd it come from? GIS, updating data. I know my time's up. Thank you.
Anyone else for public comment? Seeing no one and no one online, we will end public comment. Communications?
There are none.
Unfinished business,
There is none.
new business resolutions,
There is none.
new business ordinances.
There are none.
Tableman Committee,
Mr.
Alderman O'Brien.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, I would like to make the motion to remove from the table R22035, which is relative to the adoption of fiscal year 2023 proposed budget for the city of Nashua General Enterprise Special Revenue and Grants Funds.
The motion is to remove R22035 from the table. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. This evening, we're going to be reviewing administrative services, appropriations, and revenues. They are listed on your agenda. And we'll be starting with administrative services. There's someone here that's going to lead us through the division.
Here. Oh, you want to sit here? Oh, okay. Also, I'm here.
And let the record show that Alderman Lopez is going to,
Thank you.
Ms. Kleiner?
Good evening, Kim Kleiner, Administrative Services Director. This evening, we've provided you all with a packet, hopefully to answer some of the questions that have been asked of us, and if we have not answered your questions, please let us know, and we'll be happy to get those for you. So in the Administrative Services Office, there's 3 unaffiliated employees and 1 proposed employee. The director, myself, 85% of my salary is charged to administrative services. The department, 15% of my salary is charged to the benefits self-insurance fund. Throughout our division, we are made up of unaffiliated employees and UAW clerical and professional employees. And I understand the other evening there were some questions regarding the unaffiliated plan. That plan was adopted 4.5 years ago, and it consists of 8 steps. The reason for the 8 steps was that at the time, the cost to implement the plan was expensive. And we worked to realize what the market value of each job was, and that's step 8. So if you think of it, step 8 is the market value. People were put on the steps according to their level of experience within, and the desire is to get those employees to step 8, which was market value at the time. The only thing I would caution is this was 4.5 years ago, so that was market value then. And market value for positions, for salaries, has changed drastically over the last couple of years after COVID-19. So if the desire is to get them to market value at step 8, that step at step 8 is receiving 2.3%. Steps in between are receiving 4% plus the 2.3%, which is the cost of living adjustment. So that
Any,
was.
you want to take questions as we
Sure.
go?
Sure.
Okay, Alderman Sullivan?
Thank you. Okay, I just want to understand this, because I'm reading it and you're talking and I'm trying to
Sure.
do it all together. Like walking and chewing gum. Okay, so you're saying that there are 23 grades and 8 steps. When you say a grade, and what I've looked at for contracts so far, I'm gonna try to draw a parallel. For instance, the teacher's contract. So depending on the amount of years that they have in education and whatnot, puts them at a certain grade, and then they go up from there. Is that what happens here?
Ms. Kleiner?
Director Kleiner. No, so, great question though. So when you look at the unaffiliated plan, it's hard, don't compare it to a union contract.
Okay,
The unaffiliated plan, these jobs are put on the grade according to many factors. Job responsibilities, level of degree that's required, how many employees you may supervise, the level of experience that is required. So you may have the director of DPW, which is a grade 23, where you may have the CFO or the director of administrative services, which is a 22. So it's the level of experience and the job responsibilities that really place you on the grade.
Got it. Thank you.
Could I have a
Follow-up?
And the 8 steps, you said the last step, so from step 7 to step 8 is a 2.3% increase only. Steps 1 through 7 are 4% plus a 2.3%?
Correct.
Okay.
All set?
Yes, thank you.
I see,
Question was answered.
what?
My question was answered.
Okay, any other questions on that subject? All right.
Oh, actually. What is the?
I so much want to say too late, but go ahead.
I'll just ask it later. When does the contract expire for the unaffiliated?
So the unaffiliated plan is different than a contract. The unaffiliated plan is brought forth by the mayor and approved by the Board of Aldermen. Generally, it had been quite a while when we last brought it forward, but we try to look at it when we feel the need, especially when we see that salaries are not at market value and we're having a hard time hiring, but it does not expire as a
May I
contract.
follow up?
Yeah, follow up.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So it's not a binding thing, it's a plan. We want to do this. We want to pay our employees X percentage per year, or 2.3 plus 4%. But let's say the city had an asteroid strike and they couldn't pay anyone. They wouldn't be legally bound to pay a 6.3% increase. That's just what you want to do, correct?
Alderman Kleiner?
Unless the Board of Aldermen passed legislation, you are bound by the plan. The plan was approved in an ordinance.
Okay, thank you.
The unaffiliated is just as valid as the other as contracts. It's what was presented by the mayor, adopted under ordinance by the Board of Aldermen, and it's in place until they come back and want to change the ordinance.
So it's governed by an ordinance rather than by a contract?
Yes.
Okay, all right.
Actually, all the contracts are binded by ordinance as well.
Oh, very good.
That's why they come here for our approval. Any other questions on that subject? Next subject, Alderman, Ms. Kleiner?
So there is one position that is proposed to be added to the Administrative Services Office. And originally, it was put forth as a paralegal, and we're working with the mayor's office and the legal department on the job description. So it's draft form. We really need to decide how best to effectively address this position. The concern is that we have a number of documents that need to be redacted, both on the DocuWare system and both through Right to Knows. Currently, our administrator has been performing that duties, and unfortunately, it is causing other duties that she is assigned to be quite time constrained. So this office administrator position that you see was moved mid-year from the risk department to administrative services. So when the original office administrator left, Ms. Vino was moved over from risk to form that position, and she's done a great job. But with the increase in responsibility, both through redaction and answers of Right to Knows for the entire division, that has become too much. So we need to add an office administrator, and we would prefer that it has experience in right to know. There's also 1/2 grant writer position, and I'm not sure if Ms. Davies is with us tonight on Zoom.
Yes.
But she is half funded in our department and half funded by the National School District. And she's done wonderful things within the last year. And if anyone would like to hear about the grants, I'm sure that she would be willing to give you a synopsis of those.
Ms. Davies is online if somebody has a question. Alderman Jettie?
Yeah, it's not about the grant writer, it's about the proposed paralegal position. So you use the term paralegal, but, are you requiring that someone have I'm not sure, paralegals are, oftentimes just people who work in law offices who used to be secretaries and now they're called paralegals, but there are people who actually get degrees, in paralegal studies, either an associate's or a bachelor's degree in paralegal studies. Are you requiring that a person have a paralegal degree, or is that just a name you're using for the position?
Ms. Kleiner?
Great question. So in discussion, we have realized that it's really more important that this person has municipal experience, right to know experience, records management experience. So not necessarily would they need a paralegal degree if they have those other qualifications. So as we look at finalizing up the job description, if it is approved by the board, we can rename that position to something that would more fit, more suit it.
Okay, thank you.
All set, Alderman Jettie?
Yes, thank you.
Yes, Alderman Kelly?
Thank you. My question is regards to the paralegal as well. I know that we funded a right to know lawyer in the legal office. What would be the difference in the responsibilities for the paralegal to your department?
Ms. Kleiner?
Great question. So the right to know attorney in the legal office provides us all with legal assistance and answers all of our legal questions. This position would not be that. In fact, this position would commonly reach out to the attorney in the legal office with any questions, as we always do. This position would actually be working with the departments, obtaining any of the documents, working with the redaction, answering the responses. It would also deal with records management throughout our division, and then other duties as assigned.
If I could just interject, I talked to Attorney Bolton, and that attorney is going to be trying to do more other legal work than right to know, so.
If I could
Alderman
follow up.
Kelly?
Oh, thank you. Thank you, that was very clear. I forgot my question. Come back to it.
Anyone else? Alderman Sullivan?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Under the wages, I see under the wages for administrative services, Department 106, that those wages are up 38% year over year.
Did we jump ahead?
Did we? I thought we were on 106.
106? Okay.
So if I add into that, so I just want to make sure that I have the blank filled in. The paralegal position, that's what we'll call it, 60,000. And then the balance is the half of the grant writer? Do I have that right? Plus maybe there's the other increases for the 3.35. Because I saw you have 2.35 full-time employees in 22, 3.35 proposed for 23. So that So just help me understand where that 38% is coming
Ms.
from.
Kleiner?
I appreciate it.
Sure. So, in 51100, you have 85% of the director. You have the current office administrator, and that was an increase because the original office administrator was only roughly $43,000, and the office administrator that was moved from the risk department was $87,000. And then you have half of the grant writer and the proposed position.
The grant writer is split between us and the Board of Ed, right, or school department.
Yes.
And by the way, the grant writers bring money into us. You all set, Alderman Sullivan?
Yes, thank you.
Alderman Dowd, I remembered my question.
Okay, Alderman Kelly, you remember your question?
I do, thank you. Ms. Kleiner, you were talking about how the proposed paralegal would do a lot of the redactions and working through the records that we need to get up online. Do you anticipate them having enough work after those records are put up to keep them full-time, or do you think it's going to be more of a temporary position?
Ms. Kleiner?
Great question. So I think one of the things to remember with the DocuWare system and with providing records online is that is going to be ongoing, because documents will come, they'll be added to the system, they'll constantly need to be reviewed. Once you begin a process like that, which is very beneficial, you'll always have documents that have to be reviewed. We just have a lot right now.
This person will be very busy. Thank you.
Okay. Alderman Jettie?
Yeah, thank you. So back to the paralegal, the right to know paralegal. So, can you just answer, I've heard the criticism that, when someone calls City Hall and asks a question, if you just answered the question, there wouldn't be this necessity to go through this whole right to know procedure. What is your answer to that?
Ms. Kleiner?
I would agree. If it's a single question, I would hope that our staff is answering the question. A right to know, and I'll give an example. When you're asking for multiple documents that require the pulling of multiple files within assessing, reviewing those files for any necessary non-public information, that takes time and that's consuming. You can't answer that over the phone. Then we would commonly have those files reviewed, redacted if necessary, and then given to the individual that's requested. That's a right to know, and that's what this position would do. If someone called and asked one of our staff members in any department a question, I would hope that we would be able to, if not answer the question immediately, at least find the information and return the call.
Could I
Follow up?
So so there are requests for information which become right to know requests, even though the person doesn't say, I'm filing a right to know request. There are requests that just fall into that category without it being declared such.
Ms. Kleiner?
Yes, there are requests that fall into that category. And commonly, the requests I just spoke of, where there's a large number of documents that need to be reviewed, redacted if necessary, and then supplied.
All set, Alderman Jettie, or?
Yeah, I think so. I just think the public is under the impression that, that a right to know request is a document that's labeled right to know, that is filed with some body, but I think it's being explained to us that, you know, that there are requests that fall under that category and come under the right to know law that, you know, that aren't necessarily, you know, labeled as such by the requester, or, you know, it just happens that the nature of the request, you know, makes it fall into that category.
I could be wrong, and you're an attorney. I think when somebody says right to know law, that it has some legal implications beyond just the question.
I think, if I can.
Sure.
I think what Director Kleiner is saying is that without someone saying that this is a right to know request, you know, if they just, you know, ask a question and they're, in order to answer the question, it requires, you know, the procurement of documents and stuff. I think Director Kleiner is saying that, you know, that would fall under the right to know, even though it's not labeled as such. Am I understanding that correctly, Director Kleiner?
Ms. Kleiner?
Through you?
That's correct. We would treat that as a right to know request, whether or not it's specified.
Alderman O'Brien?
Yeah, just as a state rep, I'm under the impression the city is not a purveyor of sub-secret squirrel information or anything. Everything's a public document. So any request from the public is a right to know request. I mean, some can be answered easy. Where's the men's room? You could say it's around the corner. But when you're asking for documents, and due to the personal nature, which I totally appreciate, that somebody is redacting and eliminating some of the stuff that should not really be out there in the public information. But any formal or informal request is a right to know by RSA law.
Ms. Kleiner? I mean, was that a question?
No, that's it.
Alderman Clee?
Thank you so much, Mr. Chairman. I just wanted to make a comment about redacting and so on. I did it for both Department of Defense and for the Department of VA when I worked with quality management and when I worked with the admin office. And I can tell you that it's not just a matter of taking a document and striking it out. I'm not sure how you all do it here, but we had to take it, we had to read it, we had to strike it out, and then you had to make a Xerox copy of it, because oftentimes you could still read through the marker. So you had to make another copy of it so that you could not read through the blacking. So it's not just a matter of taking it and marking it, and there it's done. You actually have to have copied the document, you have to mark it, and then you have to recopy it. I'm not sure if that's exactly how you do it here, but don't quite do it that way. Is that correct?
Ms. Kleiner?
Oh, you have computers that do the redacting. Yeah.
Yes,
I'm old school. I had to do the whole,
I was gonna say, the US government's come up with a better way.
yeah.
that much.
Thank you to our IT department. We have a much better way than.
Yeah, if I may.
Alderman O'Brien? again?
Yeah, I would just further like to say on the right to know, I mean, there are certain things that the city does withhold, and that's understandable, particularly like contract negotiations. You don't want one particular union contracting any particular boards or anything else like that with the right to know request during negotiations. So therefore, and the other thing is like real estate transactions. Those have been here for a while and are relatively new, I think already seen it, that the city enters into some agreements that we privately discuss, because if the information publicly got out there, it could double the price. We may not be getting the fair market value for the taxpayer. The right to know can hurt you as well as it can help you. So it's very prudently judged and written. Thank you.
Alderman Kathy?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I heard you mention DocuWeb, so I have some questions about that, but I can ask them later if you have other things that you need to present first, or I don't want to jump the gun.
We've prepared a summary further on in the packet.
Okay.
All right. Any other questions on what's been presented so far? If not, Ms. Kleiner?
So, if we're all set with 106, we can move on to the Arlington Street Community Center.
Page 75.
So the community center, as some of you may know, had a director, and the director has joined the mayor's office. The position was posted. We have made an offer, and we are at that step. So you'll see a small decrease in the wages for that one position, and that is due to it being a new hire. Relatively everything else is staying the same, but in your packet, I do give you a copy of the Arlington Street Community. This is a special revenue fund that is created for the center. The current balance is $13,893. The center is rented to families within the area or within the national community. The revenue from those rentals goes into this fund, and the director can draw from that for program expenses as needed. So when it's important, when you're looking at the center, to realize that that's not all of the expenses. There is revenue generated and some small expenses from that.
Any questions on the Arlington Street? Yes, Alderman Kathy?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Do we receive any grants related to Arlington Street?
Ms. Kleiner?
So Ms. Davies did receive a grant, and if I may let her speak to that.
Ms. Davies?
Hi. Yes, we did receive a grant this year. We received a $10,000 grant from the U.S. Conference of Mayors for Economic Mobility Innovation to be used for programming at the Arlington Street Community Center. We also currently have another grant out specifically for programming at the community center for around $6,000 right now. And once we have the new director in place, we'll begin looking for additional grants to fit the programming that she or they want to see. So.
Thank you.
Yes, Alderman Kelly?
Thank you. Director Kleiner, actually, you started to answer one of my questions because I was wondering where the rental came from, because I know we own the building. My question is, and maybe this is for whoever is currently doing the, filling the position of running the center, but do we approach people who want to rent it in an equitable way? So if someone can't afford it, do we waive it because it's a community center?
Ms. Kleiner?
Absolutely. That's part of the basis for the center. Excuse me. You know, when we opened the center was specifically to address a lot of the issues brought forth by my brother's keeper. So some of the families that have rented this center have been families, and we're talking very minimal cost to rent it, have been families that just need a place to have a birthday party for their children because, you know, they don't have enough room in their apartment. That's commonly what you see. Could be a baby shower or something of that as well. We have had a few outside businesses that have rented the center, more specifically like a speech pathologist that rented the center that wasn't with the school district to hold some training sessions and that sort of thing. But it is up to the director. They do fill out an application. The director works closely with the risk department, and the policy was set by the Arlington Street Community Center board when it opened.
Thank you.
Okay. Alderman Lopez?
To Ms. Davies or Ms. Kleiner, whoever can answer, in terms of grant writing, has there been, what does that scene even look like after COVID? Like, you can't point to previous years exactly for activity when everybody was closed. I'm not sure if all agencies are currently aligned for providing grants and have the same kind of priorities. So how do you rebuild after that, and what are we likely to see the Arlington Street community center able to do over the next couple of months and year?
Alderman Lopez, can you bring your microphone closer to the? Thanks.
Yes. Did you hear all of that, everybody who needed to hear it? No?
Did you get the question, Ms. Davies?
Yes, if you're asking me, I understood.
Okay.
Okay.
The Arlington Street Community Center actually did a lot of programming during COVID. I probably shouldn't speak to this, should whoever's doing their Arlington Street Center next, but it was really easy to sell them to funders because of how much outreach they did in terms of connecting families with the resources that they need during the pandemic in terms of like electronics and also running remote classes. They did a lot of equitable preschool kindergarten readiness programming they were able to provide remotely with students from Riviere. And yeah, so the grant that we did receive, the one from the U.S. Conference of Mayors, really based on the strength of the remote programming that they were able to provide during the time period that you're referring to, and building on that and actually taking that work and reaching out more to the English language learner population in the neighborhood and in the city to grow the reach of that within that population, if that answers your question.
All
Yep.
set?
And I didn't realize there was another presentation coming, sorry.
Yes, Alderman Clee.
Thank you, and Mr. Chairman, if this is not the right time to ask this question, please feel free to.
All right, I'll interrupt.
Thank you, I appreciate that. As I've gone through some of the revenue sections in here, I do notice at the end of like the city revenue and the school special revenue, that there's a page that says revenue funds funded by grants. Is that what, and I know that I've worked with her with the NEA grant and so on, so I know she is phenomenal. Would these also be some of the work that she does as far as the grants are concerned? So for instance, on page 257 of the budget.
Is that has all city grants? Because they're extensive and.
I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman, so like, for instance, I'm looking at the city special revenue funds, revenue and appropriations. So page 257 says, this is for the city of Nashua. Under the school revenue, there's also a page with grants and so on. So I didn't know if those are some of the grants that she
Ms.
would
Kleiner?
have gotten.
Right, so the grants that are listed on page 257 are actually secured, I mean, some are secured from the division themselves, such as the police department. Those grants, those Homeland Security grants, they apply for those grants year over year. So that really is a much more extensive list than the grants that Ms. Davies would.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
take a quick look. I don't see it's the same grants.
Thank you, I appreciate that. And I do appreciate everything that Ms. Davies does. Her enthusiasm is electric, so, thank you.
Any other questions on the, oh, Alderman Sullivan?
Thank you very much. Director Kleiner, on the, I see that the salary for that line item for Arlington Street went down, but benefits went up.
Ms. Kleiner? Oh.
And then just kind of a subset of that question. The 55,000, that reflects the active offer that is out there now, because currently that one full-time employee, that's an open head right now, but you do have a job offer out to a candidate, and that reflects that offer.
Ms. Kleiner?
Yes, that does reflect that job offer. Great question on the benefits. So when you have an open position within the city, and we are in budget preparation, we need to budget appropriately for the benefits. So we budget at a two-person plan, because you don't know if that person coming in is going to be single, family, two-person. So it's a middle of the road estimate that we make, and that's why you see it increasing. That may not necessarily be what the new hire chooses, and you may have some savings in that line.
All right, thanks for clarifying. Yep.
Alderman Kathy?
Just to piggyback off of that question, if there were savings, where does that money go? Does it just sit in your budget for other uses, or how does that work?
No, it would lapse back to the general fund.
Okay, thank you.
Could you just give, for the new alderman, give a very brief overview of the fact that the city's owned this building for a number of years and how it evolved into the community center?
Certainly. Back in 2016, wow, when Mayor Donches joined the city again, he initiated the My Brother's Keeper and accepted the My Brother's Keeper initiative. We did a strategic plan working with agencies across the city and the National School District and many city divisions to outline what they saw as one of the greatest needs within the community. It was decided after a day-long and weeks-long of study that they needed one central place where we could offer programming. So commonly you'll see for instance, the public health department will go there and use the community center for vaccinations or for education. It's a place that allows them to go and offer it outside of their Mulberry Street location. You may see teachers that use the community center. We also have had programming for pre-K, and we've had programming that we've offered for Dr. Crisp's school, which was one of the facilities at the time that was in need of additional space. So this really was a joint collaboration between all of the city divisions. At the time, the building had become, it was city-owned. It had become unoccupied because the renter had left the building. There were no funds expended other than the alderman appropriated some money to install computers. So there is a computer lab at the center. Other than that, all work was done by the committee and volunteers to clean, paint, repair, and get the center open for business.
Okay, all set on the community center. Next department.
So the next item that we just wanted to bring up briefly is, you'll see in your packet, there's a fund called City Events. And some aldermen might be familiar with this. We manage this account as well within the Administrative Services Office. And this is the account where funds, donations are made for city events, most of it being the Pride event. But the donations are made to the city, they're kept here, and expenditures are made as appropriate.
What page is that on? City events?
Excuse me?
What page is that on? City events?
Yeah,
It's in her package.
It's in the.
Oh, in the package,
what's in
okay.
the package?
It's like in the middle.
It's page 4 or 5.
I think the next in line is the
Human resources.
human resources.
So,
Question, Mr. Chairman,
Yes,
sorry.
Alderman Sullivan?
Before you move on, I looked at it's not the cover page, it's the first page in, and I see the term commodities next to payroll. I'm not familiar with that term when it comes to budgeting. Could you help me?
Ms. Kleiner?
certainly. So that spreadsheet that you're looking at is the summaries, the totals without benefits. So we back out benefits. Commonly, when the divisions are given an expectation by the mayor, it is less benefits because that's not something that they have control over. So the totals that you're looking at exclude benefits, and the commodities are everything else except salaries. So all the other expense line items excluding salaries and benefits
Oh,
in each department.
okay. Thank you.
Like supplies.
Yes. All right, great, thank you.
Okay, we on to benefits? I mean, on to.
Human resources,
Human resources?
if I may ask, Ms. Trask
Yes,
to
Ms.
join
Kleiner?
us.
No,
So,
you can sit. Please, name and position.
Nancy Trask, Human Resource Manager.
so I will say, just to begin, the first couple documents in your packet were actually requests that we received. We received a request to see open positions, within the city, which, Nancy and her staff manage, and the employee counts by division. Important to note that when you talk about employees, there's many different types of employees: full-time, part-time, per diem, seasonal. The other, request, which actually came much earlier, our apologies, was turnover. And it's something that we've looked at in the city, especially this past year. I was pleased to see that throughout 2019 to 2022, it showed nothing that I wouldn't have expected. In fact, I would have expected more, especially since COVID, because that's what we're seeing out there with other employers. I think what has happened is the city has had a number of employees leave, which are high level and very visible, which makes us question, should we look at this? It's a great question, and we'll continue to track it now that we've got a system to do that. But the city sees spikes. So as you look at the graphs, you're gonna see that Ms. Trask and her team worked very hard because they're ramping up for summer or seasonal help. So you'll see a lot of new hires somewhere between April and June. And then you're gonna see a large spike of terminations come the end of August into September, right? And that's what we saw. The other turnover that we saw stays relatively constant. And it's nothing that I would consider, looking at other municipalities and talking to other municipal managers, that I would consider out of the ordinary. I want to caution that our data does not include schools. We do not hire for the schools. And it does not include police or fire. So you're looking at, here you're looking at DPW, City Hall, Public Health. And those are commonly the ones that Ms. Trask and her staff deal with, although they do onboard everybody.
Quick question.
Yes, Alderman Sullivan?
Thank you very much. When you look at turnover for those key positions that you talked about, does the city have a succession plan in each department? So should a director leave, what happens? Is there someone at a different level that could assume that position? Or do you have to go out and hire each and every time?
Ms. Kleiner?
Great question. And I'm gonna say, I would hope so. So as a division director, that should be something that you're looking at, and that you're offering the training and approaching hiring in that way. So we've done quite a bit of work in our division to ensure that we have some succession planning and that we have some individuals that can step up, especially for our key roles. becomes a little bit harder to do in a department like assessing, where you have had a lot of turnover. But for most of our departments, we are in really good shape.
Thank you.
All set? Alderman O'Brien?
Yeah, Director Kleiner, you could probably, just to assist the new alderman, is it not really a city policy that first preference does give to city workers as far as any type of promotional or anything else? People can swap within divisions if qualified to, you know, take that particular position. Case in point, I remember getting those flyers within the fire department. I don't think anybody was gonna leave the fire department for another occupation here at City Hall. Not saying that the people do a great job here, but the thing is, it leads to segue into my next thing. Perhaps you, Ms. Trask, could take those numbers of police and fire, which are stable organizations, and apply City Hall as, have them as the base study to see what the turnover rate basically is. And it would probably assist in that regards. But to get back to city policy of trying to keep within, opportunities to exist.
Yes, and so Ms. Trask and her staff handle the posting policy, but it's different in each union contract, but there are limitations, and you must post appropriately for personnel that are qualified to step forth and apply first, internal policy.
Any specific questions? Okay, Alderman Kathy?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Maybe you were already going to address this, and if I'm jumping the gun, I apologize. Can you walk me through why the change from HR to payroll? Because I noticed last year that those payroll positions existed just under HR. So I'm curious if there was a reason you had to, or if there's a benefit to doing it this way. Because I noticed there's a jump in the salary on the payroll side versus the HR side. I'd just like to get more clarification on those things. Either one.
Great question. So to the succession planning, that's what you see on the payroll side. So perfect lead in here. When there was a human resources division and you had a division director specific to that division, human resources administration, payroll, and benefits were all within that division. When we kind of had them join the administrative services division, and that division director no longer, position is no longer within the city. We looked at it, and what you had were 3 very capable managers within those departments. And they do very different functions, although they do work very closely together. So human resources has its functions and operates extremely well under Ms. Trask. Benefits operates under Caitlin Pimentel. Again, that's another example of succession planning. Ms. Pimentel moved up. And these managers have their own staff, although the 3 departments do collaborate together. And there is specific benefits from having them as their own departments with their own managers, their own goals, their own priorities, and their own budgets.
Can I get a follow-up, Mr. Chair?
Follow-up?
Thank you.
Alderman Kathy?
Just for clarity, for my sake, and I apologize if this is a dumb question, but what I think I hear you saying is you did it so there could be a succession plan. So if someone was essentially hitting the ceiling in HR, they're doing a payroll job, they're going over to payroll department so they can go up to a manager position, but underneath payroll? That's what's happening? Or did you need to create the department for some other reason? Because it didn't exist last year, if I'm not misunderstanding.
Ms. Kleiner?
So I think there's some confusion as to did it exist? It existed, okay? So there was the Human Resources Division, and then there was HR, Payroll, and Benefits. Each their own specific job function with their own specific employees, and each had a manager. All we did for budget purposes was split this out, number one, so that we can look at how the goals and the priorities and the salaries are being allocated. And number two, to give each manager some sense of what their budget is and how their budget reflects their priorities and their goals. But payroll always existed, benefits always existed. They were just all under this HR division umbrella.
Thank you. That does clear it up. So it was, you're just breaking it out more specifically so we can get our eyeballs on it. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, we eliminated a division director and eliminated the division, and the 3 departments that were in the division are now separate. Alderman Kelly?
Thank you. My question is actually a perfect follow-on to that. I know that your position as Administrative Services Director was created, and you've been doing a lot of work to look at these departments. As we've done that, I've noticed, like, sometimes we lose someone who's a director, and we've decided, oh, we're just not going to replace them. So I'm sort of interested in how you go about deciding when that person should be replaced and when they shouldn't.
Ms. Kleiner?
Well, I'm gonna ask for clarification, when a division director should be replaced?
Right, so, for example, I know we, for a little bit, we were talking about not putting a chief assessor in. And then we also, I believe, we didn't do a director of IT anymore when that retirement happened. So when you're looking at those things, as you're kind of figuring out, does payroll come out over here? How do you evaluate that decision? Does that make sense?
Yes.
Ms.
Like
Kleiner?
a dual?
So I think ultimately, let's start with the assessing department. There's a very valid reason you need a chief assessor. So state DRA rules and ASB rules require assessing supervisor. That's a certification. So we need a chief assessor. We need that function, or at least an assessing supervisor. So there's some departments where you need a specific level of certification, right, and qualifications. When we look at a department like IT, you have 3 incredible managers within information technology. And you have one individual that we put forth as Chief Information Officer some time ago, because infrastructure, security-wise, he has that expertise. So there's other ways that you may structure a department other than it needing a director at the top. That department has 3 very separate functions, all with very solid expertise and managers at the top. Same with payroll, HR, and benefits. You have 3 very solid managers, and really no need for a division director to be over that position reporting to another division director, if that makes sense. More specifically, if it's outside of the Administrative Services Division, and of course, anything that I would do, I would propose to the mayor as well. Divisions are looked at, and we make recommendations to the mayor, and the mayor would ultimately have the authority to say whether or not a position was necessary. But I think that in the past, we've done some great restructuring within the city, which has really made sense. It's optimized not only the salary cost, but the educational levels of the people and the positions that you have on staff.
If I could follow up, please?
Follow up, Alderman Kelly?
Thank you. And you started to get to my follow-up, which was just, you know, as you have that attrition, I'm sure you're looking at that. How often are you looking at, you know, how restructuring might be able to help you with salary and attrition costs?
Ms. Klein?
So I think it's different within each division, although we do commonly, because of our function, speak with other division directors and work through restructuring with them. So most recently, Director Sullivan and some changes that were made within his division. I think you really look at it always, right? So you should look at it while you're preparing your goals and your priorities for the coming year. You should look at it when you have turnover and you've lost some degree of education. I don't think it's a specific time. I think it's ongoing.
Great answer, thank you.
Okay, Alderman Kathy?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I noticed in the payroll breakout for salaries that the human resources specialist, if my math is correct, and maybe it's not, the increase is a 9% bump from the prior year. But all the other ones I've noticed are either 6% or below that, matching the unaffiliated scale. Just curious if you could speak to why that jump is outside of the typical ranges I'm seeing.
Ms. Kleiner?
I can give specific numbers if you need me to.
I'm assuming you're speaking of the position within human resources.
Yeah, under 51100, human resources specialist, I notated that in 2022, they're at 5414, and this year they're at 55872, which is a jump of 9%. If my math serves me correctly.
So there was a position, and I want
Page 280.
I want to be careful because as we did eliminate the HR director last year, we looked at the positions, Ms. Trask looked at the positions and the duties that were assigned, and more duties were brought down both to Ms. Trask and also to her staff. We raised that position because that position assumed more duties.
So it was really a restructuring of the role per se, rather than just bumping them up.
Yes, the job description was altered and added to.
Do you, and maybe you don't know the answer to this, I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, follow up.
Thank you. Do you know if there are any other positions in your department that are mirroring this, or is this sort of a one-off, or they're two off or something like that, or is there a lot of this in the department? I didn't go through all the numbers, but I didn't know if that was irregular just for this year, or there's a lot of positions like that this year.
Ms. Kleiner?
There is a position within the payroll department and one position within the IT.
Thank you.
Other questions? All right, move on to, we sort of hit a little bit on payroll, but payroll is next. Could you just introduce yourself for the record?
My name is Peter Donovan, and I'm the payroll manager.
Okay. Ms. Kleiner?
So to Alderman Kathy's question on the restructuring, Mr. Donovan, if you could talk a little bit about the positions that moved within your department.
Well, we did have the one promotion. We had a payroll analyst that was working with us for 5 years now, going on 5 years. And she's
Just bring your
done an
microphone a
excellent-
little closer to you. It's,
Oh, I'm sorry.
It's very directional.
I'll start again. We had a payroll analyst in the department that has been with us for 5 years, and she's done an excellent job. And she's gained an incredible amount of knowledge in different aspects of the payroll process, and with her interaction with third parties that we deal with all the time, like the IRS, different garnishment issues, New Hampshire retirement system. So she was well deserving of a promotion, and so that's, after 5 years, she received one. And then we did have somebody who resigned, and we did bring on a new employee. And as you know, it's been a horrible time to bring on any employees, because the qualifications of people out there, it's hard. It's hard to really get somebody that is qualified. We did find someone and brought them on in March. And so we are currently fully staffed for the first time in quite a few months.
congratulations.
Yeah. It's nice.
Other questions for the payroll department group? None? Thank you. I guess we'll go on to benefits.
Benefits.
Ms. Kleiner?
And we apologize, Ms. Pimentel couldn't be here this evening, but everyone's favorite. So as we talk about benefits, I did include a few notes for you. I understand that this is an area that can be very daunting. I do want to say that the city, both Ms. Pimentel and I work extremely closely with Workplace Benefits Solution, otherwise known as WBS, who are our consultants. So I think it's important to note where we are. For medical, we're looking at a 7.2% increase. Now, why is I'm sure everyone's next question. And there's a number of reasons. So we have year to date through the end of March, we have 66 members with claims in excess of $75,000, totaling $12.3 million. In addition to that, we have 6 members with claims in excess of $350,000, which is our stop loss, totaling $3.8 million. And we actually give you kind of a brief oversight here of what a claim can look like. So just to remember, anything over $350,000, our stop loss kicks in. You definitely want to have stop loss insurance, but I will say stop loss insurance is getting increasingly expensive out there in the market. So we were expected to have a 20% increase in the cost of our stop loss. But considering these claims I just mentioned, you don't want to go without it. We did go out for an RFP for that. Our current stop loss carrier, being Anthem, did not come in as lowest cost. QBE did, right around the 20% mark. So that is who we are signing with for fiscal '23. It's important, I think, to note that even if you had claims this year, say of 40 million, the general industry trend is 8%. So that 40 million in the same claims next year is gonna be 8% higher. That's just industry trend. Same exact, could be the same exact claims. It's just the cost of inflation for the industry. So when we look at redesign, healthcare redesign, which is what you see in many of the labor contracts being brought before you, that's what we're trying to mitigate. That 8% industry trend on inflation. So, and we've done very well. And so we're very thankful. Most of our unions have worked with us. And we're seeing some real savings, most recently with the teacher's contract, a little over $2 million in savings there. And where does that savings come from? That savings comes from the city's cost for the 80% that we put in. The other thing that has really impacted us this year is COVID, and it's impacted everyone. So we saw 1.3 million in COVID expenses through the end of March. 478,000 was testing alone. 825,000 was treatment. And so when we look at COVID overall for our claim period, it added about 5% to our claims. And that's pretty significant. The cost, I did include some of our enrollment numbers. Right now, we are currently trending 106% of budget for this year. We have seen, the good news is we've seen some of our claims level off since March. So through April, now heading into May, they seem to have leveled. We aren't seeing any COVID hospitalizations, although you're still seeing testing costs. So we think we'll come out about 104% of budget. That's a little bit of good news. So I did also include the benefits fund, which is the self-insurance fund. And I just want to mention that these fund accounts that I'm providing to you are generally located, you'd find them in financial services. They're part of the packet that financial services puts out on the website each month. But those are really where dental is flat. No increase to our dental. So you're really looking at 7.2% in health claims and the 20% in stop loss. Those are our big ticket items.
Questions? Alderman Kathy?
I have a few questions, if you'll bear with me. The first one is this a usual year? And I noticed when you were talking, the claims, it seemed like you were indicating that they seem high. Is this a typical year or is this a higher year for us with all these claims?
Great question. So we were very concerned with COVID that people had put off healthcare, right? And to some extent, healthcare wasn't accessible for them. And so we looked at this and we built in a little bit of a buffer, not enough, I think. But we've seen other entities have about a 3% increase in just ordinary claims, which we're attributing to that period where people really didn't have access to health care for either routine screenings or for care on existing conditions. So we think that the claims are higher than we budgeted for some of that reason.
Follow up, Mr. Chair?
Follow up?
Thank you. Just a few more. I noticed on the employer had deductible contributions, there was a pretty significant increase. I'm going to assume that's from this changeover to the new plan, and now we're contributing more to the HSAs for the employees. Is that correct?
Mr. Planner?
Great question. So the city goes into open enrollment. Generally, this year we're a little late. Generally, it's mid-April. And of course, we're crafting our budget for the next year, but we don't know what people's enrollments are going to be. So we saw this last year where we underestimated the HSA contributions because of and that we had a number of labor unions that had changed, right? They'd gone to the higher HMO, so you had a lot of employees switch over to the HSA. This year, we're trying to take some of that into consideration, especially considering that it's the teachers union that is switching to the higher HMO, and we expect many of their employees will switch to the HSA. So we've raised that considerably.
Another follow-up, Mr. Chair? Thank you. I noticed under equipment for the fund, it's quite a big jump for computer software, up to $150,000 for the benefit self-insurance fund. Can you speak to that?
Ms. Kleiner?
So that is our light system, and the contract came before finance February. I may be wrong in those dates. But that is for our open enrollment. So, and it's going very well. It was a very fast implementation. I cannot say how fantastic our benefits team, working with IT, working with our consultants, implemented that system in such a short time period. And we did use it for this open enrollment. There's quite a few benefits to having that software. Number one, this was all done by paper, so it was very inefficient. Employees seem to be enjoying the fact that they can go on from anywhere and enroll in their benefits. They can actually cost them out and realize real life scenarios. We'll be expanding Alight so that we're offering a lot of different benefits and information and cost scenarios on that software, but that is the first year cost for that software.
One more, Mr. Chair.
Follow-up question?
In our benefits package, I assume we offer 401k. What is our match? What is the city's match for employees?
Ms. Kleiner?
So we don't. We have a 457
Okay.
plan.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Alderman Kelly?
Thank you. I had a few questions. Can you just explain what a stop loss is? I don't think everybody knows what that means.
Ms. Kleiner?
Sure. Stop loss is insurance that you carry. For the city, anytime there is a claim, and it's one individual, one incident, so it has to be the same claim for the same type of illness. Anytime that exceeds $350,000, our stop loss picks up and reimburses the city for the costs.
If I could have one follow-up.
Follow-up?
Thank you. I just didn't know if everyone knew what that was, so. The other question I had, and you may or may not be able to answer this, but the COVID-related expenses, I know we got a lot of federal dollars that could reimburse us for stuff. Is that a possibility with these expenses specific to COVID that you've outlined?
Ms. Kleiner?
Great question. I'm hesitant. So we received a lot of federal dollars that certainly helped in terms of public health and emergency management and those types. And that did help us in this area as well to some extent, because you had employees that were receiving testing and, vaccinations and things through public health, that we wouldn't have seen. But we're also held to the same standard as other employers where, if you had a group plan, a group health insurance plan, per President Biden's ruling, you had to reimburse for COVID tests that they went to the pharmacy and bought. And with a self-insured plan, that cost us entirely the cities, right? So, I think the federal funding has helped in that it's been given to other divisions, which has supplied our employees with some benefits, but it hasn't directly impacted the self-insurance funds as dollars brought in.
Okay, thank you.
All set?
Yep.
And Alderman Sullivan first.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This got my attention. $4.1 million in malignant neoplasm claims. First of all, I had to Google what a malignant neoplasm was. And then $4.1 million. Do we, of those 66 people, do you have an idea of how many are claiming that? And is that a red flag for the city? That seems to be a lot.
Ms. Kleiner?
Great question. So each year, at the close of a benefit year, we receive specific information regarding the plan from Anthem, and we actually do a walkthrough of all of the charges, and I try to supply the board a memo towards the end of the year. Does it seem high to me? No, unfortunately. I think these are some of the costs that you're seeing as a result of delayed testing and delayed care during COVID. And unfortunately, if you look at the age of our population, you also have to take some of that into consideration. So I try to include that in my annual summary to you all, and I can get you last year's if you'd like.
Yeah, thank you.
You're welcome.
Follow-up?
Thank you. Under the COVID expenses, 1.3 million in COVID expenses. The expenses listed below that, 478, 825 et al. Do those make up the 1.3 or is that in addition to?
Ms. Kleiner?
Those make up. Those make up.
Okay.
All set?
Yes, thank you.
Alderman Lopez?
Regarding the retirement plan, I know a 401k is a mutually funded, in theory, plan for retirement, and 403Bs are what nonprofits use and are more tax deductible. I did not know what a 457, is that specifically municipalities that have advantages? Is that a 404 error on my part?
Ms. Kleiner?
Yes, the 457 is the municipal, the public government.
Is it, can I follow up?
Follow-up?
Is there a difference in either the types of things you can invest in as a result of that, or the city's obligations to match?
Ms. Kleiner?
Great. So the city does not match. It's all employee funded. And depending upon, there's a number of companies that you can, for a loss of word,
Invest.
invest with, thank you. And so depending, ours is now, we're currently with Empower. But the city does not match. It's not like a traditional 401k that you're thinking of with a with a private entity. And we do have a 403 B on the school side.
All set, Alderman Lopez?
I just think I need to go do more research.
Alderman Jettie?
I have several questions, but the first one through you, if I could ask Alderman Sullivan, what did Dr. Google tell you about malignant neoplasms?
May I?
Dr. Sullivan?
Consult physician.
I only play one at aldermanic meetings. A malignant neoplasm is another term for a cancerous term. The term neoplasm refers to an abnormal growth of tissue. The term malignant means the tumor is cancerous and is likely to spread, metastasize beyond its point of origin. That is from the clevelandclinic.org.
All set on that one, yes.
Thank
Other
you.
question?
Yeah. So, to follow up on that point, is that, is that related to any occupations that we have within the city? I remember hearing about firefighters being especially susceptible to cancer because of the things that they're exposed to. Is there any correlation there, or is this
No,
just
not,
all over the place?
no, not that has been brought to our attention. Neither, our Anthem does have the opportunity to drill down in claims. I would think that if something like that existed, it would be brought to our attention, but no, these are throughout. And when we look at health insurance, we're talking every entity in the city, police, fire, schools, so.
Okay, thank you.
Follow-up, or,
Another question?
yep.
So, I notice, under the plans, there are a total of 2,034 people covered by plans, and high deductible health plan is only 22. I thought the high deductible health plan was the answer to our high expenses. We were moving people into that. Did I misunderstand that? Is it a different one that we're
Ms.
moving
Blair?
people to?
Yes, so I just want to say that these are 2,034 employees, so they're not necessarily plan participants, because you could have their families. Normally, it's around 5,500 in total being covered. These are the number of employees in these plans. The 22 that you're seeing, that's the high deductible health plan without an HSA, a health savings account. The high deductible plan with an HSA is the 873 employees. And that's the plan where the city contributes. They have, depending on single or two-person family, they have a $2,000 or $4,000 deductible, and we contribute $1,500 to $3,000. So
Okay.
that 873 under the HSA is the one that you.
Okay. And
Follow-up?
please, and so what kind of an increase did we have in that, in the HSA?
Ms. Kleiner?
So when you're looking at rate increases, it's across the board.
I meant how many more people switched to that plan?
So we had a great number, and I didn't bring the numbers with me for last open enrollment. I don't have the numbers from this open enrollment, which just ended Friday, but I can get those to the board.
Okay.
All set?
Yes, one more.
One more?
And so you said that we've switched from Anthem to something called QBE. What is that? What's QBE? Did I hear you correctly?
Ms. Kleiner?
Yes, so QBE is another insurance company that provides stop-loss insurance. And I did know the full name, and it has escaped me, but I can get it for you. There were 5 bids on the RFP that WBS put out. And QBE is one that WBS has some experience, good experience with, but I can get you the full name.
Okay, so that brings up another question.
Okay.
So this is just the stop loss. We had, Anthem was managing our health plan. Are they still managing the health plan?
Ms.
So
Kleiner?
Anthem is still managing the healthcare. Anthem has a number of products. So not only does Anthem manage our healthcare plans, Anthem is also our HSA provider. But they also had an arm, or have an arm, that extends the stop-loss insurance. It's just they had a significant increase of almost 30%. So we decided not to go with them for the stop-loss coverage.
But as far as the employees are concerned, they're still dealing with Anthem and the doctors and health providers that are associated with Anthem?
Yes, none of that has changed.
Thank you, that's all I have. Thank you.
Yeah, Alderman Captain.
Sorry, just one more quick question. This is more of a curiosity. Who covers our dental? Is it Delta or who do we have our dental plan through?
Ms. Klein?
Oh, boy.
You can email it to me later. It's not super important, but I'm just curious. Because you said the plan, you said the claims were flat.
Sorry, I'm gonna look at Nancy. Yeah.
Delta Dental, okay. May I follow?
Thank you, Nancy.
Follow-up?
You said that it was flat, like there weren't a lot of claims for dental, there were no claims? Or is it just the same number of claims, like it didn't go up or down?
We fell within budget, so there's no increase for fiscal '23.
Okay, thank you.
Alderman Lopez.
Is a claim, something's wrong with my teeth, or is a claim like I went to the dentist and,
Ms. Klein?
like, are we gonna have like a surge this year because nobody got their teeth brushed during COVID?
Great question. It's a great
If
question.
someone's not paid to do it, Steve.
So with, depending on, there's several different dental plans. And the teachers union has, I think, 7 different plans. So different levels, and what I mean by that is different levels of coverage, right? So some might offer you 2 cleanings a year, and another one might only offer you 1, and you pay different rates for the different coverage. So quite often, you'll find people that may have children with braces. Well, remember those years? That tend to buy what we call the dental buy-up plan, right? Because they get more coverage for that. We haven't seen any increase, and when we talk real claims, we're talking, anything. You go for the cleaning, there's a cost to that. You go for crown, there's a cost to that. But as long as those claims are within the amount that the city and the employee are funding, you're fine. That's when they're flat, right? There's no additional cost to the city.
All set, Alderman?
Thank you for understanding that I meant cleaning, not brushing.
Any other questions? Oh, yes, Alderman Debo?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Do we, and maybe I missed it here, I'm looking, do we offer vision for?
Alderman, Ms. Kleiner?
Great question. Yes, we do offer vision insurance, and it's probably one of the cheapest insurance I've seen. And it's entirely up to an employee whether they decide to sign up for the vision, which is separate. But it's a very low cost to our employees.
Follow-up, yeah. What does that fall under, just the regular claims, or is that a separate line item in here?
It does fall under the regular claims.
Okay, great, thank you.
Any other questions on benefits? Alderman Lopez?
Is the vision plan available for aldermen, or would I drive everyone's premium way up? Sorry.
No. Any other questions? Yes, Alderman Wilson.
I don't have a question, but towards that, before I started on the board a long time ago, the aldermen did get health benefits from the city. Probably, I'm gonna say 30 years ago, health and dental benefits from the city. And I know that in Manchester, they're trying to do away with it.
Away with them.
Yeah, because their aldermen, I guess, get medical and dental benefits from the city. I think I read that
Yeah.
last week in
Then
the
you need
paper.
later.
Yeah. Brush my teeth again.
Okay, any other questions on benefits? Seeing none, next we go to telecommunications. And that's on page 86.
Congratulations, sir.
I was gonna say, speak for yourself.
I don't know if I can handle all these numbers, there's so many.
A stranger in our midst. So names and address, names and positions, please.
Nick Miservich, Chief Information Officer.
Dan McMullen, I am the Manager of Technical Services.
Okay. Ms. Kleiner?
And Jason Tui, who is the Manager of Product Development? Am I saying, did I get that right?
Project.
Project, thank you. Couldn't be with us this evening. So there's no changes to telecommunications for fiscal '23.
But no budget change.
No budget changes. We like those.
Mr. Chair,
Yes, Alderman Kathy?
just for clarity, out of curiosity, I noticed all the other departments have or most of them have a cellular line item. But this also has a cellular line item. What is this covering in the telecom? Is it city employees or?
So I'll speak to the cellular in the regular departments is when an employee receives a stipend for their cellular phone, when they're using it for business purposes. And I'll point to Mr. Miservich for the telecommunications cellular.
All right, that line item is for departments such as the fire, the MDTs in their vehicles. Telecommunications pays for the cellular plans for those devices.
Thank you.
Alderman Jettie?
So maybe I thought Alderman Kathy's question was about the telecommunications. There are only two items, the telephone voice, telephone cellular. There are no employees, there are no benefits, there's none of the usual things that we see in a department.
Ms. Kleiner?
Yes, so I may have misunderstood Alderman Kathy's question. I thought there was a question whether these line items were the same as the ones you see within the division budgets.
You may have answered his question, but my question is about.
They are separate. These are separate. There's no employees. This isn't really a department. This is more a place where these charges sit because they are of like charges, and they're their own contracts and plans managed by IT.
So the employees are in a different department or in?
There are no employees for telecommunications. So there's no salary items, there's no benefit line items.
Okay.
It's just more like a category, if you will. It's just separated in the budget from IT.
Okay,
I think that'll become clearer under IT. Alderman Cleve?
Thank you. It's just an oddity. I went back, I looked at 21, 22, and 23, and I saw that we've actually decreased the telecommunications budget from 21 to 23 by about over $10,000. Why is that?
For continued savings throughout the years, renegotiating contracts with vendors and such. So there's, it's flat this year because of the cost savings compensated for the cost increases.
Thank you.
When a question is asked, please say who's answering it so the person doing the recording can get the right names. Alderman Lopez?
That was Nick.
Does the budget or the savings that Alderman Cooley has identified, does that include the selling of the software that I think you guys made to Manchester for the Public Health Department?
Nick
Or
Miser,
the revenue we got?
Nick Miservich, no, that funds go into the general fund. It doesn't go into telecom or IT.
Thank you for doing that.
Any other questions on telecommunications? Seeing none, IT. Ms. Kleiner?
Kim Kleiner. So there's a few changes within the IT budget, and I think there was some questions to specific line items such as software maintenance and hardware maintenance, which I'll look to Mr. McMullen and Mr. Miservich to answer. I do want to say that there's a significant amount of projects and work that's being done within IT with an incredibly small staff for the work that they complete. We're looking at, we've had a number of implementations and upgrades over the past couple years, I think starting way back with assessing and AP5, and then, moving right on Munis, which Mr. Tui's team looks at for tax department. They also have risk management coming up, which you may have heard about that contract at finance, and that needs to be upgraded. One of the things that you're gonna notice about software costs in general, and you'll see it within other divisions that come forward that pay for their own, or at least some of their own, like police. There's been a general increase in software across the industry. And, some of this is the reliance that we all have in order to complete our business functions, and some of that reliance increased during COVID. So you'll hear, we are certainly not, although we're probably the largest, we are not the only ones that you'll see before you that will talk about those IT costs. For specific increases, I'll turn it over to Mr. Miservich or Mr. McMullen.
Good.
Nick Miservich. I'll start and then I'll let Dan chime in on a couple items. To expand on Director Kleiner's remarks about software maintenance, the industry is making a shift in licensing costs to catch up to virtualization. So we no longer have physical servers per se. Everything's been virtualized. And we used to pay per, what's called per socket, which is, a socket is the actual CPU within the server. All of our host machines have 2 sockets in them, so we were paying on that. They are getting wise to the industry of starting to license by cores. So we still have 2 sockets, but the number of cores increase with each generation of the processing chip. So to compensate for that, software vendors are starting to charge per core instead of per socket, which they make more money and it costs us more money. Other changes are we moved stuff around from software maintenance to hardware maintenance because it should have been broken out long ago. And, as we sat down and really focused on the budget this year, we identified a lot of pieces that were really in the wrong place. So just to get a better understanding of where the money's going, we made those changes for fiscal year '23. Other reasons are all these new applications require software maintenance going forward. So as we buy new applications, there's a corresponding software maintenance cost for the future. And finally, we have some, I wouldn't say contracts, but for a lack of a better term, contract that we pay multi-year. So we'll get an offer of, paying for 2 years and get the third year free, but we have to pay it all up front, and we have some of those hitting in FY23. So it actually saves the city a considerable amount of money doing it that way.
Is there any follow-up or?
Dan McMullen, I don't have a whole lot to add to the software side. As Nick explained, it's kind of more his area, and Jason as well. My area deals more with, as we go further down, and the list that Director Kleiner supplied you with is the computer equipment. So I can either comment on that, or I can wait. I don't want to get ahead of anybody here either.
Okay, Alderman Kathy?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a few questions. I know when we met, we spoke, and I know earlier this year we had an appropriation for the, I keep getting the name wrong, Emergency Data Center. Is that roughly correct? I know that there's more appropriations coming, requests for appropriations coming. Is that included in the budget, or that's going to be a separate items later on in the year? I'm assuming they're coming this year.
Nick Miservich, it's the disaster recovery site that you're referring to, and those appropriations are coming out of different funds, not our IT budget.
Oh, okay. Follow up, Mr. Chair?
Follow
up. The software you spoke of, is a majority of the software mainly on contracts, or are we buying a lot of it upfront and not having to continually pay fees over and over and over again, like monthly or yearly sort of contracts or subscriptions?
Nick Miservich, it's a combination. So depending on the software, for example, one that came up last week at Finance Committee was for Infor, and that's just on a yearly basis. That's probably one of our most expensive software maintenance renewals, coming in at $292,000. And it increases every year.
Thank you. I noticed that the website visits were down quite a bit, and that was curious to me because in this information age, I would assume that those would go up as people visit the website to get more information about the city, whatever they need. I know I'm on it quite frequently, but maybe that's just because I'm an alderman. Is there a reason why? Are we having trouble with the website, people getting to it? Is there any sort of issues that is going on the back end that we need to be aware of? Or is it just people just not visiting as frequently as they did?
Nick Miservich, it's just because people aren't visiting as frequently. There's been very little interruption with the vendor that hosts the website for the city.
Okay, thank you.
Alderman Sullivan?
Thank you. The software contracts that you alluded to, does the city have a procurement person that negotiates these contracts?
Director Kleiner. So Kelly Parkinson, our purchasing manager, she works with all of our departments whenever there is a procurement. A lot of these software maintenance packages are required. You have the software, for instance, like a Lawson, that was a very large purchase and implementation 9 years ago. It would be millions of dollars for the city to move away. So in those type of instances, you're negotiating with them, but you only have so much room on a large package like that. When it's a new purchase, we certainly look at the cost of ongoing maintenance. Many of the contracts that you're seeing that are year over year are existing packages within the city that have provided functions, and it would be extremely costly for the city to move away from those.
Okay, thank you.
All set?
Mhm.
Okay. Alderman Jettie?
Thank you. I'm not sure if this is the right place to ask this question, but are you in charge of the website, the website design, that the public accesses? Is that part of your department?
Nick Miserich, no, that falls under the programming department, which is Jason Toohey's team. And as far as redesign, we are limited to a template that the hosting company provides. We can modify colors and stuff like that, but the overall presentation, it's in a template. And if we want to modify that template, which we can, there will be a cost associated with that.
Could I follow up?
Follow-up question?
So, just to, put this out there, I use the website all the time, and I kind of go to where I'm used to going without really thinking about it. But other people have said to me that they find our website to be very difficult to negotiate and find anything, and so I'm just making you aware of that that people who don't use it all the time, it's not, they say it's not very user friendly, so that's just
Alderman Klein, Ms. Kleiner?
No, thank you. Director Kleiner, I will say that, Rich Barabee, who's our website designer or administrator, he worked with the mayor's office and division directors about a year ago, and we did make some significant changes to the website. That was part of an upgrade that comes about, I think, every 2 years, don't hold me, but by contract, you're allowed to make more changes than normal. And we did that. I think it's better than it was, but we always look for feedback. And if there are changes that we can make within the existing template, we will. The numbers going down, I think they're gonna go back up the more information we get out there. So I will say that, just to mention it here, we just put the link to DocuWare on the website today. It has some issues, which they're working through, and they hope to have it resolved by tomorrow. But as we're putting information like that on the website, I think you'll see a lot more people moving towards it. That's the desire, is if we can make information as easy for our citizens to get, without them having to actually get in the car and come over and see us. Not that we don't want to see them. Please don't take that. But I think certainly if anyone has any suggestions, please, Mr. Barabee's very open to hearing them.
Okay, thank you.
Alderman Clee?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just want to make a comment. When I first became alderman, it was a very different looking website. And I know both myself and at that time Alderman Schmidt had spoken to IT about some of the things that we found very difficult with our constituents and so on. And those changes were made. And I do appreciate it. And I think anytime someone goes to a website, it's very difficult because there are embedded menus. And it doesn't become intuitive until you use it. And then you start to see it. When I'm looking for the police department, now I just go straight to the police department, but I can get to the police department from there. I can get to community development. I can get to all of those different ones, but I have to know what's under community development in order to find it. Because it's like a giant menu and tree and everything. Sometimes I do the searches, which tends to bring me more to documents than to the webpage. But that would probably be my only suggestion, but
No, just
I see a lot of changes you've made, and I appreciate that.
get us back on track. The website's not part of their budget. Alderman Lopez?
Oh, I had a suggestion, but I was gonna tell her.
Any other questions? Alderman Kathy?
2 questions. One, what department is the website under again? Remind me, please. What department does the website fall under?
Oh, yes.
Project development. Jason Tui is the manager, and he's part of IT.
Okay. One more follow-up.
But he's not here.
Yeah, that's fine. Follow.
Alderman Kathy?
I should have asked this earlier. The disaster recovery site, is that going to be completed this year? Is that the plan? Or, I mean, well, I know we always have a plan, but just curious whether if there's an ETA on that.
Nick Miservich, yes, that is the plan to have it completed this calendar year. However, we're still waiting for equipment to show up that we've ordered back in January. So that's just gives you an example of how long things are taking for shipping.
Thank you.
Other questions? I have a question. Do we have an optimum Wi-Fi system in this building?
Well, define optimum.
Yes. Could we have a better system?
There are some adjustments that can be made. I just need to know what areas are you experiencing issues with? I mean, is it here in the chamber or?
Here in the chamber for one.
Okay.
Connectivity is not great sometimes, so. Anyway. Enough of that question. If there's nothing else for IT, we'll go on to risk management. Hang on.
I have an IT question.
Kelly?
I believe the gentleman to my right was gonna talk about the computer equipment, and I had a question around that. Do you want him to speak first, and then I can ask my question?
Ask the question and he can answer it.
That's fine too. I noticed that under the computer equipment that you're replacing a bunch of printers. I seem to remember that we also had a contract in front of us that we rented a lot of them. So is it a mix? Are these, I'm just sort of interested in that because I know.
Alderman Kelly, because you're wearing a mask, would you bring your microphone closer? It's hard to hear you.
Is that better?
Yes.
Would you like me to repeat my question?
Yes.
Okay, I said, I was looking at the equipment, you had a number of printers that you are replacing. I also remember a contract for renting printers. I was wondering if it's a mix, or are we going from renting them to deciding that we should own them?
Go ahead.
Dan McMullen. So we've got about 150 network printers that we support, or my group supports, in about 35 buildings. And of those, the majority of them we own. The ones that you see, the contracts that you see for the leases are for the multi-function printer. So for a simpler term, the copiers, scanning, printing, copying. And of those, there's probably about, maybe about 30 of that 150 that we lease. So we lease them for a 4 to 5 year period of time. Lease comes up for renewal, we renegotiate and lease it again. But for the majority of the networked printers, we own them.
Can I have a follow-up?
Follow-up?
Thank you. So let's get nerdy about printers for a second. I mean, I think I'm interested as we're looking at buying quite a few of them, at least in my opinion, but who knows, maybe it's a tiny amount of the ones you actually buy. Are we looking at efficiencies in terms of how they print? And also, I know there are printers that allow you to sort of keep people from just printing long documents and walking away and forgetting about them and having to print them again. Are we doing any of that to kind of reduce paper costs?
So, I'm sorry, Dan McMullen again. So,
Mention your name each time so that the transcriptions.
Yep, Dan McMullen. So back in 2014, we actually embarked on a program when Mayor Loza was here. She was big against printing. She wanted to reduce costs as well. So we did an entire study on major buildings in the city, as far as how many printers we had, how many people, where they were located, et cetera. And we were able to make some consolidations at that point. At the same time, we actually implemented a piece of software called PaperCut, which some of the employees here can attest to. Sometimes they get irritated with it. But the design of that basically allows us to have more control over what is printed and how it's printed. We can even restrict large print jobs to going to smaller printers, which have a higher cost per page, and we can have them sent to the print shop, which is a much lower cost. Also, there's a pop-up, so if you're printing a color document now, you get a pop-up every time that pretty much says, do you want to print this in color? Because many times, you might have an email, or you might have a spreadsheet or something, and you're going to print it, not even realizing that your setting is set to color. So by default, it would print a color every time. The cost is 10 times the cost per page. So black and white is about a penny a page, color is about 10 or 11 cents per page. So that's actually been very effective. And I run reports every week, look at trends, try to see where there's areas. Occasionally, I'll send out a little reminder email, not always well received, but it's there. So overall, I think we've done a pretty good job of trying to consolidate. Many years ago, you'd find a lot of individual printers in individual offices. It didn't make sense. So we kind of did away with those. Now we have more network printers centrally located that can service, a number of people. So overall, we've made some pretty good steps in that direction.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Alderman Gaffey.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Curious what the lifespan of the actual computer hardware is. A couple years, 10 years, what are we looking at here? And just walk me through who vets or goes out for the contracts and that sort of thing.
So, there was a second sheet, I believe Director Kleiner put in there, a spreadsheet that I had kind of thrown together a while ago to kind of give her an idea of the ages of a lot of the computers we have. And unfortunately, a big bulk of them were probably 12 to 14 plus years old, which was definitely presenting a problem for my group. And as a city, when you're trying to attract new employees and you're trying to support people, you're trying to offer them decent technology, and we were definitely behind the curve there. This year, as noted in the packet that Director Kleiner provided you with, we were able to make some good strides in replacing, especially the old stuff. I personally, I think that years ago, the software was driving the hardware. I think to some degree that's plateaued a little bit. A lot of our users, they use maybe email and a web browser, so it's not a problem for them. But when you have a city engineer that's trying to use AutoCAD and other things, and the computer is basically spinning there for half an hour, that's not effective. So we're trying to make some headway this current fiscal year and hopefully next fiscal year to try to get some of those numbers a little bit better shape. It's hard to say exactly how old. Ideally, maybe a five-year period. Ideally, again, and it depends on the department. So even when we spec out equipment, it's not just one flavor is for everybody. It really depends on their job function.
So, may I follow
up?
So you're not bulk buying, City Hall needs a bunch of HP computers and you're just buying them all. You're just individually, what do you need for your job function?
Dan McMullen. Well, actually, we do bulk buy. So we'll bulk buy X amount, and we know pretty much where those are going to go. And then we might buy a different set of bulk for a different set of users. So a different tier of users, you might say, that have a different set of needs. So again, it's each new computer, whatever, is not going to meet the needs of every individual.
Follow
up. Is it possible, or would there be any cost savings to leasing, or like you do with the printers?
Dan McMullen. So we did do kind of an ROI a number of years ago, leasing versus purchasing. At that time, there was really not any advantage. It's something we've talked about readdressing at some point. In fact, I've engaged our Dell sales rep. He's actually working on some of those numbers for me now. So things change obviously over time. So it's something we're looking at now to see if there's any advantage to looking, recircling back and looking at that again.
One more.
Follow up.
Curious if you know, maybe don't, if these older machines have led to downtime and some I don't know, slowness in some of the departments trying to get some work done, or is that sort of minor?
Dan McMullen. I don't necessarily think it's impacting their jobs. It definitely impacts my team when we have much higher failure rates. And, you know, you're trying to scurry around to figure, okay, this is not working, so what can I provide them with? Unfortunately, we're not Best Buy, we don't have a stock room of all this new equipment. So usually we do pretty well. Usually we can pull something together pretty quickly and get somebody back up and running. So the impact probably to their job would be the downtime if there's a failure. As far as the slowness of it, there might be some impact there. It's kind of hard to measure.
But it's probably minimal.
Yeah, I'd say it's minimal.
Thank you, Mr.
All
Chair.
set?
Yep.
Just for clarification, Ms. Kleiner, would you point out that the school department and the police department have their separate IT groups?
Director Kleiner, that is correct. Police department and school department have their own IT departments, although they do talk and they work together very well when needed. And there was talk years ago, but I think it works very well currently as the situation is.
Just wanted to clarify that, especially for the new alderman. So if you have IT questions for the school department, you can ask them when they come in, because they have a lot of computers. All right, if there's nothing else, we'll go to risk. Risk management is on page 93.
This is the, yeah.
And again, please state your names and positions for the record.
Jennifer Duchesne, Risk Manager.
Jay Honeywell, City Buildings, Maintenance Manager.
Okay. Ms. Kleiner, you want to start us off?
Yes, so you'll see with the risk management, Ms. Deshays also oversees the city building department. I know there were some significant questions regarding the increases to the risk management department, so I'm gonna look to Ms. Deshays to best answer those.
Okay.
Jennifer Duchesne. I think I'm going to start by first talking a little bit about something called IBNR, because I do not think it's very transparent in our budget. It looks like we had a huge increase, and we actually didn't. So our budget's put in place at the end of July, as you know, but our IBNR is, and I'll talk about what IBNR is in a second. The IBNR is not set until after the fiscal year is over. So we do not get those numbers till around September. So with that being said, we had a $541,000 increase to our IBNR this past year. So our budget already increased 16.22%. On top of, it's a booked, so let's get into what the IBNR it's an IBNR liability, and it's a book liability. So it's incurred but not reported, and it's all to do with claims. So it's your tail claims that haven't yet been reported, or the life of the claim itself. So how do I explain it a little better here? So we have an actuary that comes in, and they look at all our claims that are on the books right now, as of the end of the beginning of July. So 6/30 of that fiscal year, they look at all the claims on our books, and they take the incurred, the reserves, they look at the economy, they look at expenses out there in the world, they look at payroll, our fleet. Everything you can think of goes into these actuary reports. And they come up with a number, and that number is, if we were to go totally self-insured tomorrow, and we got away from the self-insurance, That's how much money it would cost us to pay for those claims that are on the books for the rest of their lives. Workers' comp is open for life. You have liability, you have 3 years to report. So all those different kinds of claims is what that IBNR makes up. So it's a booked liability. And like I said, it doesn't go on the books till September. So we're already behind the 8 ball this year by $541,000. So the actuarial IBNR expense was drawn down off the risk management fund balance, and we opened our fund balance this year at a little over $50,000. The requested FY23 budget expenses, excluding the booked IBNR liability activities, is an overall 6.18%, higher than last year. So prior fiscal year, we're at 4.9. The request for FY23 is 5.90. Does anyone have any questions about the IBNR before? It's really tough to explain, but if you have any questions, I can answer them before I get into the budget itself.
Alderman Sullivan?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have so many questions. I'm probably gonna need a side session.
Yeah. Okay.
I would just love to know what IBNR stands for. What is that acronym?
Yeah, it's incurred but not reported.
Got it.
So it's a net reserve. So every claim has a reserve number, right up until the day it closes. When it closes, the reserves all go to 0, but until that time, it has a number assigned to it in dollars, and that's put there by claims adjuster. But when the actuarial study happens, they come in and they take into consideration everything going on in the world, COVID, the cost of meds, the cost of lumber, everything goes into that because these are your claims for everything. Workers' comp, property, lawsuits, police brutality, all that goes into that number. And it's not just what's on the books for claims, it's what has yet to be reported, which could be, everything, you have 3 years to report a claim against a liability claim. Workers' comp, the tail on that is it's open for the life of a person. So all that goes into this one number that these actuaries come up with.
Okay, by the way, if you have questions that don't get answered tonight, you can send an email to the person, but make sure that all the aldermen get the questions and the answers. Okay, go ahead, follow up.
We'll have a follow-up to your question. So I can email everybody with my questions?
No, you email
Yes.
the department
Yeah?
with the questions, get the answers, they go to Donna, and she makes it public.
Okay, got it. Is this a dotted line to the benefits that we were just talking about maybe a half hour ago? Does this
No.
have anything to do with that?
No.
Do you want to address that, Ms. Kleiner?
Director Kleiner. So no, and so they're very separate. And just to be clear, when you look at when the actuaries come in and they are determining this potential liability that you have for these claims, they're preparing an actuarial report that may or may not, but taking into consideration what the life of these claims may be, that's a liability to the city that we must book. And I think we came forth last year at the end of the year because we actually needed an appropriation in order to book the 541,000, and at that time it was 250. So it completely, the IBNR booking completely depleted the fund. the additional appropriation of the 250 left it with a $50,000 balance. Now, you know, these can go either way depending on your claims and depending on the trend of your claims. But I think it's probably, for some aldermen who haven't been here forever, I know that there's been other presentations on this, it may be worth a sit down with Mr. Shays.
If I may, I would appreciate that.
Yeah, that'd be great.
I have 1,000 questions and I don't really know what to ask you, because this is, I'm just trying to follow it, so I'll spare you.
Thank you.
I'm sure that she'd be willing to meet with you one-on-one if you want.
I would, if that's okay, I'd
That's
appreciate
okay.
it. Yeah.
Alderman Kathy.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Why aren't the salaries under the risk management department? Where are they?
No,
There.
they're there.
Page 94.
Flip on what page?
Oh, it's, okay. I thought it was separate. That's my bad.
So, so $251,000 of the request that we're asking for this year, which is the bulk of our request, consists of increases to our insurance policies and our claims lines. $129,000 increase to the policies. That's 9.6% of an increase. It's an anticipation of new city business, and it's taking into consideration, this has been the hardest market that I have worked in over 25 years. This insurance market, I mean, we're still in negotiations. We're on month 3. We'll negotiate right up until the day before 7/1 when our new policies take effect. But it's been terrible. You know, COVID is giving them a lot of leeway because of uncertainty. We have a lot of insurance companies dropping out of the market. It's been a crazy world. I don't think I've ever seen it this bad. As it relates to the claims, we have about $122,000 increase that we're asking for in claim costs. That's a 4.4% anticipated above our claim activity of this year. But I'm going to talk a little bit, if I could, about each of these two items a little bit more detail. As it relates to the insurance policies, we have marketing alternatives for all lines of insurance in an attempt to keep these premium increases at a minimum. We're a really, really good account. We're an excellent account. We've had our carriers for years. Unfortunately, many of the increases that we're seeing in the market, they're not being driven by client relations or portfolios. It's being driven by business decisions. And it's made the market so unstable and unpredictable. Workers' comp, we're working right now at keeping that increase below 5%. I'm confident we'll be able to get there. We've had no changes in operations. Our payroll's minimal. And we've had no increases in our large losses. We've had some national legislative presumptions under the workers' comp, so there's been a little bit of an uptick. But other than that, we don't anticipate any large swings. As it relates to general liability, which covers so many policies, we have a lot of it bundled. We have a couple separate. It's fiduciary, public officials, park and rec liability, motor vehicle bonds, the Jackson Mills dams on this, cyber liability. Probably the most unstable due to the current economic climate right now. And the claim trend uptick in the industry is off the charts. We've added a few more policies to this, which speaks to a little bit of the increase. But the most challenging policy right now to renew is cyber liability. The carrier is saying that we're going to see, they're seeking about 100% increase in premium due to the macro claim trends in municipalities. I'm not even sure if we're going to be able to get that renewed this year. there's only 2 municipal cyber liability carriers left in the industry. Everybody else dropped out during COVID. As it relates to our property, we've been with the Hartford Insurance Company for about 40 years now, and they advised last month that they're no longer, they're non-renewing our policy. The loss trends in municipal government, it's not profitable, especially those with large amounts of K through 12 schools, because a lot of municipalities, they're not keeping up with their infrastructure, so they're realizing more losses, and that's a decision they made. But the good thing is, at the end of last week, an underwriter that I've been working with for about 20 years made some calls to our current underwriter, and we're going to be meeting with them next week to see if they're willing to keep us on. So hopefully that will be a good outcome. As it relates to claims, we're looking at about a 4.4% increase, and that's purely, anticipated claim activity based upon trending in a 5-year average of consideration. COVID put a wrench in our trending. It threw it all over the place, and a lot of things slowed down during COVID, so that's part of the reason you're seeing the increase, but also we have some claims on the books. A lot of people didn't pursue some of their claims against the city, and we're seeing them start to rev up now. Auto, we had a great year, and property, we had a loss of an elevator, a total loss of an elevator that we're replacing, and part of that will be funded this fiscal year, and the rest of it will be funded next fiscal year. And that's pretty much it for the big ticket items. I don't know if you have any other questions as it relates to other parts of the budget.
Alderman Kathy, were you all set with your portion?
Good, thank you.
Alderman Sullivan?
Thank you very much. On page 95, under other expenses, loss prevention program. I saw that was a big jump year over year.
Right. So that loss prevention line item covers so many things. And again, a lot of it has to do with COVID. Our office was, during COVID, we did a lot of things that weren't risk management. We took temperatures, we did the supply chain. There was only 2 of us in my office, so a lot of stuff got put in the back burner. And loss prevention, it covers so many things: safety, mitigation. We use it for non-claim issues, legal services, police detail, surveys, tree removal, engineering inspections. And a lot of these things we're starting to see come forward now. So they've been on hold for 2 years, a lot of it, and we're ramping that up again. And so if you look at what I've expended, or my office has expended this year, it's minimal. It's nothing. That's all going to carry over till next year.
Sullivan?
Yes, I'm all set, thank you.
All set? Any other questions? All right. Moving on to purchasing.
No city buildings.
What? Oh, city buildings, I'm sorry. I had checked it off because he was sitting in.
I was like, wait, what?
I'm Jay Honeywell, and I'm the city buildings manager, maintenance manager, and I'm on page, I think it's 97 in your book. Pretty straightforward budget. You'll see the increases in the payroll that were input by the payroll department, I guess. So I don't maintain those numbers, but the numbers that I do, I'll draw your attention to property services, where you'll see, a little increase in there. And that is for electricity, heating, gas, water, across many city buildings, well, up to a few of the 10 buildings that my department takes care of. So you'll see a little increase there. Modest increase in clothing and uniforms, cleaning and janitorial supplies, and that's it. And some of that's based on just trend data and anticipated use on the property services for electricity, gas, and water. So that explains that, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
So you have all the city buildings except the school department?
That is correct. School department, police, and fire are totally different.
Okay. Alderman Kelly first.
Thank you. My question is around, the buildings. We have a portfolio of buildings, some are old, some are new. I'm interested in how we look at efficiencies, especially with heating costs and electric going up. And when do we kind of determine, oh, well, we should be doing X, Y, and Z to this building to bring down those costs?
Sure. We're always looking for opportunities for energy efficiency. Obviously, it's budget-driven. We do have an energy manager, and when it comes to capital improvements to any of the buildings, up the chain, I go through my supervisor, Jennifer Deshays, and then Director Kleiner, all the way up to the agent to expend, the mayor, and this board, at the will of the board and the city for those major expenses.
Can I have a follow-up?
Follow-up?
please? Thank you. Do we ever like routinely look at, okay, well, the Hunt building against the library the heating is out of control? Do we ever routinely kind of look at, as these building ages, what might need more work in the efficiency department?
Okay, so the Hunt building is not under my department, but I understand the question,
Sorry,
yeah.
it was just one that came to mind.
No, I think I understand the question. You know, as buildings age, what are we doing to identify areas that need improvement? We discuss those frequently, and those come at a higher level than where I'm at. So for example, I will present the wish list up the chain, and then that wish list will be reviewed and possibly go to capital improvements for funding and approval. I don't know if that answers your question.
No, it does. I'm on the Energy and Environment Committee, so I appreciate all the work you do, but it's always a place that we can find savings whenever we can upgrade. And I know how hard it is with old buildings.
Yeah.
You're often dealing with grandfathered in things that are no longer, doing the work that they should be doing. Just re-insulated my house, and let me tell you, my bill is totally different. So thank you.
That's a quick question. Do you, like the school department, maintain a deferred maintenance list and prioritize what gets repaired?
Yeah, I have a list that I work off of. I mean, I have a preventative maintenance list, a schedule that I take care of routinely, quarterly, and then we have the other larger ticket items that I present for review for approvals to do and seek funding.
I see somebody, Alderman Captain.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I noticed under wages part-time, you guys were way under what you had budgeted for last year. Just curious why that was.
I was short-staffed last year. My part-timer left for another position with the school department, so I had a period of, I think, 4 or 6 months where that position was empty. It's since been filled. I do have a part-timer working right now and just lost a full-timer about 2 weeks ago, so that position will be posted. So we're all struggling to keep our staffing levels at 100%.
Thank you.
Question? Alderman Clee?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Again, I went back, looked at 21, 22, and 23, and I saw that you had a significant decrease from 21 to 22, and it was mostly in the utilities area, about $100,000 worth. Was that because of some changes that we made for efficiency and so on?
In regards to usage? Or?
Yeah, well, like I said, when I looked at the 2021 budget versus the 2022 budget, and then 23, I mean, I see that the 23 and 22 kind of stayed the same, but there was a $100,000 difference from 21 to 22, and it was mostly in utilities.
Yeah.
And that's why I want to know if that was due to efficiencies that you'd kind of put in, changing the lights to LED and different things within the buildings.
Jay Honeywell, yes, that's part of it, and the other part of it is we had some other assets that we no longer have. So, for example, I maintained the Burke Street facility and had to absorb utility costs for that, which we no longer have. So there have been some buildings that have rotated in and out of the department that would influence that property services line.
Okay, thank you, appreciate that.
Okay. Do you maintain a list of all the buildings and city buildings and their replacement costs?
We do have
Anticipated.
we do have assessments on the buildings that I'm responsible for, and then some, you know, that are managed by the risk management. So, yeah, we do have those, and it's a guide, and those are constantly being updated as upgrades are made. You know, for example, Court Street has a new roof, so that document's been updated to reflect the fact that the Court Street Theater has a new roof, and in 30 years, we should be considering, you know, a replacement. And then it also identifies other areas of improvement, such as windows, you know, glazing, exterior trim, repointing, stuff like that. So over the past few years, we have been putting together building assessment packages for all of the buildings.
The reason I asked the question is that based on the replacement values of buildings, there's an industry standard as to amount of deferred maintenance. It's sort of what we're looking at in the schools area. The school department has over $1 billion in buildings. So it's, we'll be talking about that with the school department, but they maintain a very accurate list. Any other questions? Okay, now we can move on to purchasing. Thank you very much. Ms. Kleiner?
Almost there. It's a big division. Hopefully, Ms. Parkinson, our purchasing manager, is still with us, but
She's not on.
no, the purchasing department has one unaffiliated, Ms. Parkinson, and then 2 full-time UAW and 1 part-time. The part-time employee is our mail services employee that delivers mail between the buildings. Purchasing also manages what Mr. McMullen referred to a little while ago as the print shop, which is one of the employees, and they print for divisions throughout the city. Everything from business cards to functions to forms.
Maps.
Budget books.
Yes, the budget book. We have found that a lot of the printing that they do is really more than one person. So we thought we'd get here at some point, but unfortunately, the city the size that we are, it has finally come to a head. So she has, Ms. Parkinson's put forth a request for an increase of $8,000. Part of it is to accommodate for a 34% paper price, but another part of it is to actually manage some printing services. We may look at moving some small things off-site during the year. Business cards are extremely difficult to do in the print shop. You have to print them, you have to cut them, and there's a constant request. So we're looking at what makes sense to keep in-house with one person in the equipment we have, and what makes sense to kind of move out. The other increase in her budget is advertising. So this is advertising everywhere. Schools, employment advertising, advertising for the board, advertising for, planning, zoning, you name it. Purchasing does it.
Just to clarify for the general public and maybe the new employees, the advertising we're talking about is the legal requirements we have for advertising public hearings and other meetings.
Correct.
And employment opportunities.
Correct.
We're not selling anything.
And unfortunately, that has grown and so they have requested an additional $11,000 in that line item.
Any questions of purchasing? Yes, Alderman Kelly.
Thank you. My ears perked up at advertising. I know a little bit about it. My question around the public notices, and this is potentially a legal one, is are we required to have print ads, and is there a certain amount, and what if you don't have a local paper? Like, I'm sort of interested in like what is required by law, and are we over it, or just meeting it, and why haven't they updated it?
I could answer, but I'm going to give it to Ms. Kleiner.
From the instructions that I have received is we are required to print it. And it has been challenging at times, but you know, quite often we will use the Union Leader and then we will use the Telegraph Saturday, and it makes it very difficult when you're scheduling, especially around the Telegraph coming out only on Saturday. And we've actually had to have longer posting time frames, you know, when we're scheduling public hearings and things. So it is a challenge, but I have been told, unless the legal department gives other instructions, that it must be printed.
And we post agendas and things here at City Hall and the library.
I know that part. I just wasn't sure about if we were required to put it in a certain number of newspapers, et cetera. Like, what about cities that don't have a local paper?
Yeah, I'm not sure what the exact requirement is for number of papers, but right now, the main place is the Union Leader.
Yeah, because the Telegraph isn't
and
anymore.
perhaps the Telegraph.
Yeah.
But those are the requirements to being met, and that's all handled through legal.
I'll follow up with them. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I've actually done quite a bit of research on this, and you do have to post in 2 separate places, and you have to post in a newspaper, but you can bypass that if you post it on the website. So you don't have, so if a city didn't have a newspaper, they could do other means, but we do. I thought we did both bulletins in City Hall and the website.
We do.
That's what I thought. Okay.
And the Union Leader.
Yeah.
I post in Union Leader comments all the time.
Alderman Sullivan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. When it comes to, one question on, could you help me understand Lawson requisition approval? What is that? I think we talked about that at IT, but is that software? What is that?
Director Kleiner?
So I know Lawson requisition approvals are when a city employee puts in a requisition within our Lawson, and it goes to the manager or division director, and quite often it has several different approvals depending on the amount of the requisition.
Right.
And then ultimately, when it has been approved, will route to the purchasing department to be processed.
Okay. Follow up, please.
Follow up.
Thank you. Does this department keep track of a metric when they're negotiating contracts off original value of the contract and then the negotiated final price of the contract?
Ms. Kleiner? Director Kleiner?
Yes, so Ms. Parkinson has a number of different metrics that she carries. A lot of them have to do with the RFP process, and she does maintain different spreadsheets and things of that sort that some have been required in the past. I think last year there was an inquiry, but certainly feel free to reach out to her and she can provide you some data. She does track it.
Fantastic. Thank you.
What's that? Alderman Kathy?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I see under the wages part-time, is that the same issue that the building manager had, short-staffed? Is that why the numbers are down?
Director Kleiner?
Yes, we were without the mail services individual for a period of time.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Purchasing? Seeing none, thank you. Move on to assessing. Director Kleiner?
Assessing. So there's two areas in assessing that should be noted. The first is wages full-time, although it's a small part of a decrease. We have left the funding for the chief assessor within the budget. It is a position the city cannot do without. And, you know, it's very sad for us that Mr. Vincent has retired. We have posted the position in everywhere that we can possibly think of. And we have actually begun calling consulting firms to see what firms can provide us what services. At this point, to no avail. When we looked at the need, we felt we needed to fund both the chief assessor as a salary, but also as a consulting line item, depending on which we can obtain first. So not necessarily may we expend all this, but we need both options available to the city, especially in a year of a revaluation.
Questions? Alderman Kathy?
Is this the point where we can ask about DocuWeb?
By the way?
Sure.
DocuWare.
Yeah, DocuWare, sorry. I spoke. Thinking about the website. I know earlier this year we spoke about it. I was wondering if there was any update on when we might think that that project would conclude, number one. And then number two, if you were able to sort of ballpark what you would need in terms of a budget or appropriations to expedite that process. I'm assuming you'll need more employees to redact and so forth, because I'm assuming it wouldn't be just one person. That seems like a lot of work for one person, so didn't know if you had any information on that.
Yes.
Director Kleiner?
So it's in your packet. And I'm not going to say that I necessarily recommend, I leave it up to the board. When we spoke earlier, we are looking at the number of individual pages, and I said, well, over 1 million individual pages. So now that we are nearing, we have 398,109 documents. Documents may be multiple pages, but these have now been placed into document categories, which allows us to make some documents public in the click of a button, right? We know a property record card is a public document. All property record cards were forced to public. That's been successful. We've gone through that process. So out of the 398, 258,000 and change have been switched to public. 139,000 remain in private. 12,000 have already been reviewed. We've asked that they be switched, which will leave us a balance of 127,000. Here's the part everyone loves. They actually have to be looked at. So we did a test, me and a couple other people. On average, it's moved relatively quickly. It was about 2 minutes to breeze through a 1-page, 2-page document. And if there's no redaction, it's a click of a button to turn it to the public. Redaction's pretty easy through DocuWare. It's actually easier through DocuWare than I say through like an Adobe or a Nitro product, which is what we generally use. So I feel comfortable saying it's about 2 minutes for a document on average. Some are gonna go quicker, some are gonna take longer. If you look at that and you estimate on that, then I would say it's gonna about 265 days of 2 people.
It's not bad.
Alderman Kathy?
Yes, thank you. I appreciate you dropping the numbers. So right now, those 12,378, those are available to the public on the DocuWare.
So I will say, Director Kleiner, we have tried everything. I wanted so much to tell you this evening that yes, they were, so much. The link is up. The documents are there. They're made public. They are having a problem with the link between our website. They have assured me that tomorrow they will have worked out the kink. My apologies.
You have a follow-up?
I do,
Alderman
yes,
Kathy?
yep. Is this, these total documents, they're all under the original quote that we got from Inception Technology? We're not gonna need to go out for another bid or pay them more for all the scanning of the documents?
Director Kleiner, great question. So they still have 28 boxes on site at their facility that they're processing. That's all the original quote. We have another 50 boxes of documents and items that we could have DocuWare scan or we could scan in-house. At some point, the scanning is going to move in-house. Assessing's going to continue to create documents till the end of time that need to be scanned into DocuWare. So we haven't had those conversations, but I did note it here that there's an additional 50 boxes of different records, which we haven't decided whether we would contract outside or scan in-house.
One more.
Follow-up, yeah.
On your notes, it says not recommended at $25 an hour. What is, are you saying don't hire them at $25 an hour?
Director Kleiner?
So, I certainly, I spoke to the mayor, it's the pleasure of the board. You're looking at hiring 2 people at $25 an hour because these individuals have to have some knowledge of the records that they're reviewing and somewhat the right to know law and what is public and private information. So you're looking at $53,000 when I think between the position that we'd like to hire within administrative services and the admins downstairs in assessing who could rotate, right? You have 2 administrative assistants down there that could rotate so that they're not necessarily devoting all their time. They have to get their regular job done. We could start to make some significant progress in those 127 that are left.
Oh, so you're saying keep it in-house for now, and then instead of hiring new people. But then again, it would not be as quick as a process as the 265 days because they'll be doing other tasks as well. So it would take a little bit longer.
Yes, it would.
Okay, thank you, I appreciate it.
You're welcome.
Great. Alderman Lopez?
Director Kleiner, through the chair, have you looked at any city departments that might have parallel skill sets to what you're looking for, like maybe librarian staff or anybody in the school department who might be able to, like, if they were trained and they happen to foresee opportunities or openings, be willing to pitch in?
Director Kleiner?
Director Kleiner, I have not looked at the library. That's an excellent suggestion. We did discuss whether we thought We hire interns, generally through the school system, and I didn't know if that was really a skill set that I would expect a junior in high school to have, and if it would be that easy for them, so I didn't suggest that as far as, but there may be other school employees that we could look at, so it's a good suggestion.
Could I also double down and recommend talking to Revere and see if a partnership can be made there?
Yes, thank you.
Other assessing questions? Okay. Sorry, Kleiner.
I just wanted to inform the board, because I know there's been a lot of conversation around the revaluation. So June 2nd at 9 a.m. in the city auditorium, Vision, Mike Torello, the vice president, and the other staff will be updating the Board of Assessors. And they will be providing more information than they have in the past. So, right now, we haven't had a lot of information to share with the public, but that meeting, we're expecting more. Of course, it will be taped and viewed on YouTube, and we can send the link. But I felt it was important to let you know this evening.
Just a question,
Kathy?
just a question, follow up on that. When you say more information, that's not the final numbers, they're just updating us, or will that be the final numbers that they've tabulated?
Director Kleiner. So no, it will not be the final numbers, but they're gonna actually start to talk a little bit about trends.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Okay. Next would be GIS. GIS appropriations on 105, revenues on page 31.
Good evening. I'm Pam Andruskevich, and I'm the GIS technician here in the city of Nashua. We actually only have a couple of line changes this year. One is notable, and that's the software maintenance line. And the reason that, I think you probably had an update about this. We are at the end of a 3-year contract agreement with Esri, which is our GIS software. And that contract ends on July 31st, and we just recently, last week, I believe it was, got the updated quote, and it went up to, it increased to a total of, total was 81,000 something, I do have that written down here, I'm sorry.
872.
Yep, it's right here, 81,872.
Yeah, okay. And of that $81,872, we share that contract cost with Penachuk, and our portion is 50%, which would be $40,936, and that's an increase of a little over $13,000 from last year. So that line item would need to change from $30,000 to $43,200, which would cover the cost of the Esri contract and 3 add-on software programs that we use. So that's the largest increase. The second increase was to line 55421, which is employee training and certifications. That went up $3,000, and that's primarily due to the return of in-person conferences. And it also covers the cost of 2 employees. We have 1 DPW employee who does GIS for the Department of Public Works, and she is included in the training and certifications line. And that's the extent of our changes for this year.
Questions for GIS? Alderman Kathy.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. First, I'd like to say, I love the GIS software. I'm on there almost on a daily basis.
Oh, awesome.
So I really appreciate that the city offers it. Once I figured out what it does, I love it. So I appreciate it. It's well worth the cost. I just had a quick question about the aerial image services. It looks like you were well under your budget. Didn't know what the reason for that was.
We just made a payment to them. They did a spring flight for us, was completed in April. They just delivered it, and you can actually see the new photos. If you use the pictometry link from GIS, you'll be able to see the 2022 photos. So if you ran a budget report today, you would see that has been paid, and I think our remaining budget is like $386 in that line right now.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Other questions? Alderman Kelly?
I just want to make sure I'm looking on the right page. So I'm looking at page 105. I see your software maintenance was at 30,000.
Right.
My understanding is this is late breaking news since this was printed. Is that correct?
Right. I will point out that of that 30,000, 27.5 was for the software, and that's 50% of what the total cost was.
Okay, so my follow-on. if I
Follow-up.
could. So if that goes to 43,200, if I'm correct, then your total budget is 229,507, not the 216?
I did not do that math, but I'm sure that you're correct.
I did it twice, but I
Okay.
could be wrong. Just making sure.
Director
Okay,
Kleiner?
thank you.
Yes, Director Kleiner, very good. I didn't do it that quickly either.
I have a calculator.
So we found out very late. We were talking with Esri and in negotiations, and then Mayor Donchis and I met with Penachuk, and we just finalized it last Friday that we're gonna move forward. So it is an increase that I've reported to financial services, but it will be needed to be added. The other thing that I just wanted to point out, because I know there was a question asked during public comment, we are on track with the Esri tool for the revaluation, both GIS through Ms. Andruskevich and our IT team and our assessing team are working on that project, so.
Okay. Other questions? Alderman Sullivan?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Have the contract, the renewal contract, is this another 3-year contract? It is.
It is a 3-year contract.
It's a
yes.
large jump.
They haven't increased, I think it's been close to 10 years. I haven't been involved in the budget process for that entire 10 years, but I did look back. I have access to some of the budget records going back to 2016, and our costs have not changed at all since 2016. But what they've built into the software has increased enormously, so we've been getting pretty good value over these last few years. So I'm not surprised, and the representative that we work with from Esri has told us that they don't foresee another increase. He threw out the number of another 10 years, but I mean, I certainly can't hold him to that, but it has been a while since there's been a cost increase.
Follow-up?
Have we looked at competitors?
Yeah, it's tough because there really is no competitor to Esri. I don't know if you're familiar with Environmental Systems Research Institute, I think is what it stands for. They are the industry leader in GIS software, and they're used almost universally, especially in government, from the local level right up to the federal level. And as I was thinking about this too, because I anticipated that might be a question, the reason that Esri is so popular is that it integrates very well with a lot of other software packages, big software packages, like CivicGov that we use, Cartograph that we use, Pictometry, the aerial images that we use, our GIS viewer. It integrates with a lot of big systems that we currently use. And I'm sure that there are others that, which is what makes them an industry standard.
Okay.
Well said.
Thank you.
Any other questions? I have one question. I have problems printing when you go to print the GIS,
It takes a really long time, right?
Called the help desk.
yeah.
Yeah, no, it has always been a little bit on the slow side, and we are very, very shortly coming out with a new version, which I've tested, and it's a little better. It's still a little on the slow side, but it's definitely, I think you'll find it a little bit better.
Also, one of the capabilities on the GIS is to locate the fire hydrants.
Yes.
But recently, we found that some of their locations aren't exact. How often do they update, and how do they update?
Right, that's a good question. Over the last year, Pennachuck has started updating a dynamic service that whenever they update their records, which is actually daily, they update this hydrant service daily. We have been able to connect to that service and link it to GIS, so it should be pretty good. If it's not, then we might be having some sort of a problem with the service that they're providing to us. I know there's been a couple of times that I had to reach out to them and ask them if it was populating overnight like they said it was. So if you've noticed that things are not.
I asked that because as the DPW project, we added a hydrant, or adding a hydrant, and the other hydrant didn't look like it was in the right place on the map.
Okay.
Based on where it really was.
Okay, and that was on the GIS viewer, the public viewer, okay. Yeah, we are going to have to do it a little bit differently with the new viewer. It will probably be updated on a periodic basis, not necessarily using the overnight service that we were using. And the reason for that is that there's a lot of information that Pennachuck does not want to share publicly. Locations, they're fine with that, but there's a lot of information that should not be shared to the general public. And so what we have proposed to do so that we can still use their data is to do periodic downloads, and then we will use that in our GIS viewer rather than have it update dynamically overnight, because that would end up being a bit of a security issue for them.
Any other questions on GIS? Alderman Kathy?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. How does GIS populate things like wetland buffers? Because I know I was looking at a parcel of land that, after I talked to Director Sullivan, found out that it does have a wetland buffer on it, but on the GIS, it wasn't there, or the whole thing wasn't there. So I didn't know how it populates that information, or if it's just going off of old data, or.
The wetlands data, so there's a couple of different things that show up in GIS. There's a symbology that you see with little like swamp symbols, and that comes from planimetric data, which is generated from old aerial flights. The new viewer will have wetlands that show, that were generated from a 2019 flight that we had done that produced planimetric data. So the wetlands would be a planimetric data set. And then there's wetlands that I actually compiled probably 10 years ago from the old paper maps that the planning department had. And that was to identify prime wetlands, critical wetlands, and then something called other. And other is broken down into different categories of other greater than 9,000 square feet, and 3,000 to 9,000, and then under 3,000. Probably more information than you wanted. But anyway, so that was generated manually. So the other information that you see would be surveyed wetlands. And every time there's a survey done in the city, we request the AutoCAD files from the surveyor, and I take that information and bring it into GIS coordinately, so that, and indicate that line is a surveyed line, and that's differentiated in GIS so that you can tell what the difference is between something that was taken off from an aerial photograph, best that you can do, as opposed to something that was field mapped by a soil scientist flagged, and then survey located. And
I
that
tell
goes
you,
automatically.
they aren't accurate on, 100% accurate, because we just spent a few thousands of dollars to find out that 3 of the items that were showing up as vernal pools not only aren't vernal pools, could never be vernal pools, and that's what we had to go to the state with for the school wetland permit. So just because they're on it doesn't mean they actually exist, and we can have our survey reports sent, well, Matt Sullivan has it, so.
I was just more curious. Like I said earlier, I think the service does a great job, so I appreciate your hard work. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions on GIS? Seeing none, we'll move on to PEG Access Channel Fund. That's on 244, revenues on page 32. Another stranger I missed. Name and title?
Sure. My name is Pete Johnson, and I'm the Education Channel Access Administrator for the city. And I'm here on behalf of Jeff Ponert, who is unavailable this evening. So I have my copy of the budget here, and for the most part, it's a budget which holds the line on many of our categories. There are a couple of changes, though. Obviously, salaries will be going up, so those were put in by one of the other city departments. We are looking, if you look under salaries and wages, though, salaries part-time, those are our videographers, people that are sort of back in the back rooms when you're doing your meetings or covering a football game at Stello Stadium, those types of things. They're currently getting $15 an hour for their work. And I think we're looking to increase that to, I believe, $18 an hour. So there is a small increase in that part-time wages, going from $45,000 to $54,000. And as you know, last night, the Board of Aldermen approved a contract with BRB TV, and that is paid for out of this budget as well. And due to the increase in cost, we had to increase the line under our other contracted services, which is down at the bottom of the first page, from 150 and change to $175,000.
Okay, thank you. Question? Alderman Kelly.
Thank you. I actually had a question in terms of, so you said per diem employees are often people who are here late at night while we're here. So some of my colleagues are very verbose. Just kidding a little bit. But, you know, how do you give, is it just an estimate? Like if we go 5 hours, that's way different than if it's a 1 hour
So
meeting.
how it's worked out and is worked out in the industry is in Nashua, we pay $60 for a meeting. And if it goes over 4 hours, it goes by hour after that.
Okay.
Talked with several other departments in a conference call the other day, and they're actually trying to get their meetings a little bit shorter. So what they're doing is saying, once it goes over 4 hours, they get another 4 hours. So that hasn't been brought up here yet, but you know, it might help get the meetings done a little
So when
quicker.
our meetings run late, just be thinking of that added cost.
That was the only question I had, so thank you.
Sure.
That was a good one.
Okay, you all said Alderman Kelly?
Yeah.
Alderman Sullivan?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I had a question about revenues specific to the cable franchise fee. It's my understanding these are revenues collected by Comcast, correct? Isn't that part of your bill? You have to pay part
Correct.
of that? Yeah.
Only on the cable television portion of a bill, yes.
I'm curious to know into the future, as more homes in Nashua get cable television through streaming devices, Roku, Fire Stick, whatnot. What is the future of this revenue line? Is that going to continue? Because at that point, a household only subscribes to internet, no longer cable television.
Correct.
Yes.
We haven't seen a drastic decrease yet, but we have seen decreases. About 7 years ago, when our last franchise agreement was drawn up, our portion for the PEG Channel Fund was around $480,000, and we just got our final payment for this past fiscal year, and it's $416,000. So that has come down. One of those years was a 10% decrease because of the way Comcast does their accounting. They have what they call the triple play at one time, where you got cable, internet, and telephone, and they changed the percentages of what out of that triple play, how much was going toward TV, how much was going toward internet. And there was about a 10% drop 4 or 5 years ago. There was a large drop at that point. I don't know what's going to happen as Consolidated Communications puts out their competing internet service. But I imagine that there'll be some losses at that point as well.
Okay, thank you.
All set? All right, Alderman Jettie first, then Alderman Cap.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So under, on that point, under revenues, we've got cable TV franchise fees of $475,000. And then we've got use of fund balance, $567,878, if I can read that correctly. What's that? What is the use of the fund balance?
Basically, since it's a revenue account, separate, those are the carryover funds, if I'm saying this correctly, from year to year. So we've done a pretty good job since Mr. Barker was in the head of the IT department, and trying not to spend the money that we get and be faithful to our ratepayers. And we've saved some money in the past. It's obviously an expensive thing to keep the studios and the cameras in multiple rooms across the city and people to run it. So I believe, I'm going to lose my train of thought here.
So you were telling us about the fund balance.
Right. So we've managed to save some money over the years, but it is expensive, and as we do lose revenues from the franchise fees, that's also going to help play a part in keeping the service from using general fund monies for the future, at least the foreseeable future.
Follow-up?
Follow-up, please. So that fund balance is money that that's reserved for cable TV for this?
Correct. For those that may not know, we talked about the franchise fees earlier. The city collects 4% on the cable television portion of the bill. 2.7 of that goes into the city's general fund, and currently 1.3% goes into this special revenue account to operate the all three PEG channels, the public, education, and government channels.
And could I?
Follow-up?
Yes, please. And so how much money is left in that fund after we spend the $500,000 for this year, for next year?
That has remained about $500,000. It's gone down from about 600,000 3 or 4 years ago down to about $500,000 right now. And I anticipate that will go down even faster as some of those other revenues decrease. So.
Follow-up?
Please. So if we have $500,000 in there, and we're going to spend $500,000, wouldn't the balance be zero?
We aren't spending $500,000. So if you look at the last item on the capital improvements line, it lists a budget of $500,000, but we are not going to spend that during the year. If you look this year, we've spent about $60,000 of that year to date. So there'll be 440 left, assumingly at the beginning of next year.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I was comparing the total appropriations to the total revenue. That's-
It's just so it'll balance out in the end, and you see a balanced budget. So that's how it works.
All set, Alderman
Thank you.
Jettie?
Yes, thank you.
Alderman Kelly?
Thank you. I'm not sure if this is a question for you or Director Kleiner, but I'm gonna put it out in the ether here. As that, franchise funds, it sounds like that's very much how you fund your budget. Do we have a long-term plan if that continues to go down or goes away altogether, as technology shifts?
Director Kleiner?
Sure. So, we are in negotiations currently, the Cable TV Advisory Board, and we're wrapping up now, with Comcast. The idea has been, thus far, to recommend not increasing, the franchise fee. You're limited, to 5%. But possibly if the fund, and if the expenses require it, looking at how the city uses the 2.7 versus the 1.3. There are many communities that do not take the funds into their general fund, or at least not at that percentage rate. So it gives you some room, to look at, do we structure that differently? But right now, we've been fortunate enough to be able to operate the fund on very successfully. I mean, we have had some upgrades to equipment. You saw the upgrades in 208, the upgrades here, there were upgrades here, upgrades to the auditorium. But certainly, Mr. Johnson's right. I mean, the equipment at the studio is not going to last forever, and there will at some point become costs that we may have to look at how we structure this differently in the future.
Thank you.
There's been some discussion about providing access at Nashua High North, but that's a pretty hefty budget to do because there's nothing there now for that, correct?
Access meaning,
Zoom,
yes, and that would probably be something under the budget for the school district. It's not necessary for television, so I know they got a quote during the pandemic for about $35,000 to add that, and that didn't even include a computer to run the Zoom, so.
that's why it didn't happen.
Yes.
Alderman Kathy?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Piggybacking off of the contract negotiation, I wanted to ask how long the contracts typically are.
The last contract was 7 years and will be ending late this year, and they're looking at, I believe, a 10-year contract coming up.
This might be a question for CTAB, but in that contract, when you're negotiating, are we thinking long-term and saying, hey, you're gonna get less subscribers, so we need to change the fee structure, or is it just like a flat fee for the next 10 years?
Director Kleiner, it would be open to negotiate. So even though we'd lock in at a rate right now, we wanted to leave that flexibility, especially with a 10-year term. Should it need to, it would require a public hearing, and approval by the board.
And as Director Kleiner mentioned earlier, it's capped at a maximum of 5% by the FCC.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions for Peg? Seeing none, thank you very much. Any final wrap-up questions for administrative services before we table the budget? Alderman Sullivan?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Director Kleiner, I couldn't help but notice the number of departments that report into you. How many direct reports do you have personally?
Okay, great question. Director Kleiner, so right now, there's assessing, which when we have a chief assessor, it's a lot easier. But you would have 2, 3, 4, 5, roughly 12 or 13 if we had a chief assessor.
So now it's
Now,
10 plus the 8?
yeah,
Yeah,
it's,
a lot of people.
I think ultimately, I mean, I'll tell you, this is one of the best teams you could possibly work with. The departments work very well together. I think that we try to find common solutions to problems, and I'm very fortunate. I couldn't work with a more talented group of people.
Okay, there are no other questions? Alderman O'Brien.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to make the motion to table R-22-035.
Motion on the floor is to table the budget till the next budget meeting. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. Even though it's not on the agenda, we will now open up for public comment. State name and address in 3 minutes.
Lori Ortolano, 41 Berkeley Street. You know, I'd like to ask this board to think a little bit about this, some of what's going on in assessing. You know, you're gonna have a really hard time finding people to come here because of how you've set up that office. This whole redacting and records issue and right to know documentation isn't happening anywhere else in the state. No other municipality is doing this. No other municipality redacts their records. No assessing chief has to deal with that at all. I just got records I put in to see how many right-to-knows have been filed since January. The mayor's office had 5. They were from me. They came back to me fully redacted with my name and email and address off of it in black to me. The DPW had 6 or 7 records. Donna Graham had 8. That's in about 5 months. That is not excessive. Kim Kleiner sent me a spreadsheet, or administrative services. There's 55 on there. There is so much ridiculousness going on in there. And when she says to you, I would hope general questions are being answered, they're not. Nobody's coming to Nashua to work in an office like this. When you can be a chief or a leader in any other municipality and not have to worry about redacting all your records or getting in trouble because you left an address on. I have to come up here and state my name and address, 41 Berkeley Street, for the whole public to know. I don't have to do that at the State House. And yet the email that comes back to me, 41 Berkeley Street, is redacted because that's confidential private information. Okay? Also, property record cards came out of the legal office to me with all the addresses redacted off the card. I had never seen such a thing. I thought we were gonna be in redaction heck, in the deep darkness of that. We have hundreds of thousands of property record cards. The legal office came back and said that was a mistake. They're not gonna do that. And you don't need to hire a right-to-know paralegal or somebody who understands redacting to do this. And you're not gonna educate them on how to read a property record card with 800 fields. You can do that to anyone. They're gonna make mistakes and things are gonna be missed. It's okay. There won't be many. The legal office makes mistakes and sends me stuff unredacted in error.
30 seconds.
Mistakes happen. But what you've done is create a total mess out of a situation that there's no getting out of. Nobody should ever come to Nashua to work in assessing with an office set up like this. It's absurd. Thank you.
Anyone else public comment? Seeing no one online, we'll end public comment. General discussion. Alderman Kelly.
Yeah, I have two requests. To the point that was made earlier,
Closer to
Director
the mic.
Kleiner has many, do you need me to speak closer to my mic again? Okay, we're good. To the point that was made earlier, Director Kleiner has assumed a number of departments under her, so I would request maybe next year, we break this up into 1 or 2 nights. We used to do many of them separately. So I know my brain is mush after about 2.5 hours. And then my second question, or just request, is that I know it's really exciting when we have people in from the different departments. We don't always get to see them, but I would request that my colleagues ask questions that are pertinent to the budget and keep us moving along. Thank you.
Anyone else? All right, moving on. Remarks by Alderman. Alderman Sullivan.
Thank you very much. I just wanted to say thank you to all the city departments that came in and to Director Kleiner. That was a marathon. Thank you very much for your time, your attention, and the knowledge of the budget and what's going on. I appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Used to know years ago, we used to do the school department on a Saturday.
Thank you for moving that.
It probably took all day, yeah.
But that's when they felt unrestricted as to what they could ask for. So, nothing else? Oh, Alderman O'Brien.
Thank you. I'd like to make a motion to adjourn.
Motion is to adjourn. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? We're adjourned at 10:25. Thank you, everyone.